Alright, so I'm just going to jump right into this. I'm doing a commentary on my run from, now it's almost 4 years ago now, of Sonic Adventure DX Max Percent. This run was performed on a PS3 emulator. But in case you're afraid, I do own a PS3 and the appropriate software. So this is totally legal. um, So the run is going to start here by just killing the first boss, Chaos Zero. Not really anything interesting to remark on here. Not sure where to begin. We've got a general idea of speed running, for those of you unfamiliar, is to finish a game as quickly as possible. And then you can lay additional conditions to determine if you want to complete additional challenges as quickly as possible. So, for instance, the traditional categories are any percent, where you finish the game under any conditions, and there's 100% where you finish the game by usually some community-defined standard of total completion. Then there are additional categories, sometimes called meme categories, which introduce outlandish challenges, which still prove interesting to complete. So, that's speedrunning generally. Then we can talk about Sonic Adventure DX. Sonic Adventure DX, specifically for the PlayStation 3, is originally derived from, here I'm failing a skip because I'm not actually good at playing this game. I don't know if I ever even get this skip. We'll find out. Yeah, probably not going to happen. I'm just going to go around. Yep. So Sonic Adventure originally was released for Dreamcast in, I want to say 98. I think it was a launch title in 98. And then it was ported over to GameCube as Sonic Adventure DX, short for Director's Cut, where some things were changed, collision rules, textures. Honestly, a lot of the game was kind of totally altered. And I believe it was like a 2001 or 2003 release. That's not 2001. I think it was like 2003. DX is released for GameCube, Nintendo. And here's me doing another not great skip. I'm really not very good at this game. I'll stop commenting on that, but unless it's relevant. But DX for the GameCube Nintendo was the first port of Adventure. Then they ported it to PC, I believe, for a PC release in 2004 or 5, which was a port of the port of DX. And then finally, I believe it was from the PC version that the PS3 and Xbox titles are derived. So this is a port of a port of a port of Sonic Adventure DX. And as a result, things have gotten a little clunky in the programming as it's shifted over from system to system, and especially with this latest system that has shifted over to the PS3, you have a kind of a fundamental rearrangement of the bytes. And don't ask me how to explain, because it's been a couple years since I seriously considered all of this, and I don't know off the top of my head what it means, but basically the PS3 is coded using a different byte system called Big Endian rather than Little Endian, unless I have that backwards. But basically it flipped that. So whereas the previous 3 ports were all Little Endian, this is Big Endian, which has something to do with the way the memory is formatted. Now, theoretically, it shouldn't affect the way the game runs, because all the relevant programs inside the game, all the relevant pointers, data what we call pointers, which is when the game prompts its memory, as in, like, we need to go to this place, and it'll point to a section in memory. It should know to read that backwards, essentially. Like, it should know to read from big to little or little to big, whichever it is. But because we're now dealing with software running on a Big Endian system, reading Little Endian material, it needs to be cognizant to do that every single time. And there are certain events where, for instance, when it points to memory that it never originally intended to load, that's when it might make a mistake. So, for instance, it might say, if I'm, let me come up with a system. If I'm, here's a quick kill on the boss here just by spamming A. You can quickly tag the boss again before he goes into... It's a 1 cycle instead of a 3 cycle, which saves some time. A lot of speedrun skips that I incorporate into this run are mainly just to save myself time. I'm not much of a speedrunner. I'm not particularly concerned with finishing the game quickly. I'm mostly concerned with doing the fun little challenge bit, as I alluded to earlier, and I'll explain more in a second. So back to my example. So say that you had, I don't know, say there was a pantry full of fruits and vegetables, snacks and stuff, and you were running, you had a guy who would go open that pantry for you and get something out of it, and you told him, I want an apple, I want an orange. But really the way you're saying it is, I want you to grab the first thing from the right on the second shelf, is what you would tell him. And you would know that that's where the apples are. So when you tell this guy, go into the pantry, here's another quick skip, you can jump off the invisible floor to get some hay. Go to the pantry, read the, take the first object off the right on the second shelf, I think was what I said. So the guy will go over there and he'll grab it and he'll bring it back to you and it'll be an apple because that's where the apples are stored. So little ending essentially reads the other way around. So it'll say, rather than that, it'll say, grab the 5th item from the left on the second shelf, which should be the apples. But there are certain conditions where when you prompt the guy to grab you something off of the shelf in a place that was never intended, if you say, let's say there's nowhere in memory that says grab the first thing off the left on the second shelf. He'll grab that, and then it'll be something you didn't expect. It'll be what's sometimes called garbage data. And if I've lost any of you in the metaphor, I apologize. But it's what's colloquially called garbage data. From garbage in, garbage out, which is the idea that if you prompt the system with something it was never intended to retrieve, it will give you something unexpected. That's a little bit of a skip. If you homing attack those springs on that level, it'll take you up higher. By the way, as an overall trend here, I'm kind of walking you through. I'm kind of walking you through the philosophy of this game, I guess. As I complete, as 4-year-old, it's not 4-year-old, but 4 years prior me completes Sonic's general campaign. Sonic's campaign is not too different in this context from how you would just normally play it casually or in a speedrun. So blah blah blah. Anyway, there are circumstances in this game where you can get into specifically levels. So that was a level we just completed, or a stage is sometimes also called. Hence the title, as you might have seen in the top right in the little text, 52 stages. So we're going to call that a stage. Let's agree on that terminology. So that was a stage I just exited called Windy Valley. Now I'm going to go grab another upgrade, and then using that upgrade, I'll get into... or maybe not even using the upgrade, but I'll still grab the upgrade and then go to Casinopolis, which is the next stage. So I'll grab this upgrade here, which is the Lightspeed Shoes. Then I'll complete Casinopolis, and we'll have 3 stages under our belt. So there are circumstances. Each character in this game has a set of stages that they're intended to complete as part of the story. So Sonic is intended to complete in the game data what is stages 1 through 10, which is Emerald. Let's see if I can list them off the top of my head. We got Emerald Coast, Windy Valley, Casinopolis, Ice Cap, Twinkle Park, Speed Highway. Can't remember what 7 is. Red Mountain, Skydeck, Lost World, Final Egg. Okay, those are the 10 stages that Sonic is intended to complete. In addition to those 10 stages, and he has the most stages to complete of any character, here's me failing to do a Casinopolis skip. I don't even know if I get this. This one is, for some reason I struggle with this one a lot, probably because I'm using a keyboard instead of a controller. I've heard on a controller you can give more precise inputs, this is easier. But anyway, Sonic has this list of 10 stages that he's intended to complete. In addition to those, there is a... how do I get into this? There's an 11th stage called Hot Shelter. And for the most part, these stages do take up, in memory, they take up, in the stage list directory in memory, the slots 1 through 11. So it might be in a different order. So for instance, I believe like Casinopolis is out of order. So even though Sonic completes at 3rd, it's like in spot 8 or something. That might be correct. Not that that's particularly relevant, but the stages are stored in the stage directory, and these are the 11 action stages, which occupy slots 1 through 11, as I said. And then, in addition to these, there are other kinds of stages. So, for instance, the boss fights. Each boss fight is its own stage. And there are sub-levels. So, important sub-levels are, for instance, the Sky Acts. Because I was not able to do the skip earlier in Casinopolis, by the way, I'm collecting a bunch of rings to just do this manually. This is why I would never cut it on any speedrun board, because I just don't really have the discipline to learn these tricks. But in addition to the action stages, you've got the bosses, you've got sub-levels, and then you've even got some of the adventure fields, which are themselves stored as stages, I guess, in the stage directory, although we don't count them as stages. For the definition of stages for this run, we're only considering action stages. We're not considering bosses or sub-games, although I have thought about possibly making runs which include those, but we can talk about that later. Right now we're... This is kind of embarrassing. Looks like I'm going to be short of the 400 coins you need to, or 400 rings you need to finish this level. So I might have to do some shenanigans here to get up to 400 rings. Yeah, I'm just going to manually collect these. This is actually pretty terrible. Normally I don't have to do this. I completed these runs when I was like kind of exhausted from working a job I had at the time, which was like I was working like 90-hour weeks. So I might not have been in my best state of mind doing this. Where was I? Anyway, so characters have this default list of stages they can complete. But as a child, and this is where the core conceit of this whole run really comes in, as a child I was always intrigued with the idea of completing or at least getting access to every possible stage with every possible character. And I was tantalized by instances where it could happen. So for instance, with Tails, this is one of the first glitches many people who got into this stuff when I was a kid did, was there's a clip where Tails can jump out of the hotel area, and by escaping from the hotel area he can fly over and into Emerald Coast, which is not a stage that's normally on his resume, normally on his intended path. So stage can, or did I say he can complete it? He can get into it. He can't complete it, but he can get into Emerald Coast. Yeah, not bad. So that was always fun. It was fun to see characters where they quote unquote didn't belong. As someone where this was like my only game for a long time as a kid, I would play this obsessively, and I'd find new ways to kind of enjoy it and have fun with it, which is something that I think is kind of missing from a lot of people's experiences of games today. So over there you saw Cream. As a brief aside about Cream, that Cream the Rabbit is another character that got introduced with Sonic Advance 2. And she appears here as a cameo, even though Sonic Advance 2 released after the original Sonic Adventure. In the DX port on GameCube, they added a little Cream Easter egg where she's seen flying around after certain levels. And in a lot of versions of the game that I've played, her polygons are all messed up because they were kind of shoddily added. And she'll kind of stretch all over the place, but they managed to fix it for the PS3 version where she appears pretty stable, so that's good. Here I'm bringing this little totem to the entrance to Ice Cap, and there's kind of a series of these conditions for how you get into. So this is navigating through the adventure field to get through a stage, to get to a stage. So that was navigating from Station Square adventure field to the Mystic Ruins adventure field to then get into Ice Cap, the action stage. So right now, as I said, we have 3 action stages under our belt as Sonic. This will be our 4th when we complete this, and you'll see a fun little trick here. I'll talk about this. Setting it to auto camera, you can do this one jump, and I've gotten pretty good at that. This is a real speedrun trick to just skip that whole act, that whole area. Now, let's talk more about getting into these stages. So there's kind of 2 ways that the devs make it so that your character can't just access every stage, every action stage from their shared adventure hubs. So when they were modeling Station Square, you get the sense from their development history that they created Station Square and they created all these functional loading zones, as they're called, so loading triggers, which will take you into the action stages. And they copy-pasted that Station Square hub to all of the different characters. So the asset layout is the same, which means that the loading zones are still going to be there. So Sonic has a loading zone in Emerald Coast, and he actually goes there, so that's fine. But Tails has a loading zone in Emerald Coast, and he is not intended to complete that stage at any point in his story. So there's a barrier erected in front of the Emerald Coast loading zone. It's just this gate. It's like kind of a shoddy gate, really, and you can get through it through a lot of different clips because the polygons in this game are not perfect. As we just saw earlier, when I clipped out of the when I clipped out of that tunnel and then I fell down this level, that's another easy clip to save a little time because it gets a little tedious doing the snowboarding section over and over again. So that's one method that they keep you from accessing the loading zone. That they keep you from getting to stages you're not intended to be in is by physically blocking off the loading zone with some kind of object. So a gate, a door, and or the doors are sealed, or the list goes on. Basically, there's some physical obstacle to keep you from getting into the level. This is changed with adventure hubs after Station Square, because Station Square was the first one they modeled. When they modeled Mystic Ruins and then when they modeled Egg Carrier, they had a more resolute system, which is to just never provide you the loading zone in the first place. So you'll find that in addition to these areas being sealed off to disincentivize the player actually going there, when you do get there, if you do clip through the walls or you find some exploit to get in to where the loading zone should be, and you expect to trigger the action stage. So another example would be Skydeck. If you clip through the 2 levels of physical protection, so you clip into the room and then through the door to get to the Skydeck loading zone where it should be, you never load in because the loading zone never loaded. The loading zone itself becomes part of an asset portfolio which is tied to the character that you're playing. So if you're playing Sonic, his asset portfolio, and an asset is just some game object for anyone unfamiliar with the term, I apologize. His portfolio will load in the loading zone that he needs. If you're playing as Amy, for instance, who doesn't go to Skydeck, the Skydeck loading trigger is not included in her portfolio. By the way, right now we're working our way through Chaos 4, which is the most grueling boss, in my opinion. It takes a small eternity, and there's sadly no way to kind of shorten how long it takes, as far as I'm aware. So this is all to say that physically clipping into the location of where a loading trigger is to get access to a stage is one way to do it. Is the one way to get access. And this was something I did a lot as a kid, is I would find ways to clip into these areas. But there's other ways to do that as well, and I'll come back to that in a section, in a segment, or I'll come back to that in a second. Because right now I want to talk about what the point of this speedrun is. So I started by alluding to this idea that there are challenge categories. And the challenge category here, as you might see in the top right, is 52 stages max percent. So in addition to any percent and 100%, there's also categories like low percent. So low percent involves completing the game while acquiring the fewest amount of resources possible. That's not really appropriate to Sonic Adventure DX. That doesn't really happen here. It's not really applicable, but it is applicable to other games. As far as I'm aware, there's not really any other game where max percent is a category. I invented that. And I invented it to refer to the idea of completing as many stages in the game with as many characters as possible. So for instance, Sonic, in the course of this run, he'll complete 10 stages, and those are the 10 stages that the game intends him to complete. So there's nothing really remarkable there, and that's why I'm kind of dedicating this whole first campaign to just yapping about the course of the challenge. Other characters will make things more interesting, because most of the other characters have 5 stages to complete. So Tails, Knuckles, and E102 Gamma each have 5 stages that they complete by default of that 11 action stage registry that I spoke of earlier. But we can expand that using a couple of tricks. One of the tricks is physically clipping ourselves into an area, and I'll talk about other tricks in a minute. But the goal is to have each of these characters complete as many distinct stages as possible, action stages. So for Tails, we'll get that number way up. For U102 Gamma, we'll get that number way up, and you'll see that shortly. So in addition to completing the 5 that's by default allocated to them by the game, we'll complete additional stages through a combination of what I call entrance glitches, which is clipping through a given area to get into the loading zone. And there's other mechanics as well. So one of the other mechanics is you can, in certain circumstances, force the game to take you to a stage that was not intended. Typically this is by sequence breaking. And the two different ways that this works are what I call trap glitches and what I call or trapped glitches and what I call quit glitches. So trapped glitches are available on every version of this game, every port of this game of DX. I'm not sure how much of this is applicable to Sonic Adventure because the first port to GameCube Nintendo really did change a lot of fundamental things about how the game works. I have yet to do a lot of experimentation with the Dreamcast version, which is entirely my own fault, and I really should get around to that at some point, but the years go by and I still haven't done it. So when it comes to trapped glitches, the idea is, well, the name is derived from a consequence of how the glitch is implemented, which is that it traps your character in a given circumstance. It soft locks your character, what we would commonly call soft lock. Now, as it turns out, these soft locks are not all that hard. They are soft locks that can be escaped in certain circumstances, but that still kind of gave rise to my first term of calling it a trap glitch. So a trap glitch involves completing a stage in a sequence-broken fashion, and by completing the stage in a sequence-broken fashion, you can cause a strange interaction with something called the game's trials menu, which is another way of playing this game. So what we've been seeing to this point is called the adventure mode, and the adventure mode is playing around in this kind of open world hub, and then getting access to the individual action stages, and all the while this story is playing throughout. And then there is the trials menu, which is a different way of playing the game, where after you've played the adventure mode for X amount of time and you've unlocked given stages, you can access those stages in a stage select kind of a menu, that then you can play them in any order of your desire. The way that the trials menu populates the stages derived from the adventure mode is dependent. It's according to a set of rules. So let's talk about Knuckles, because I do play through Knuckles normally first. Okay, let's talk about Tails. So for Tails is the most infamous case of this, and he can do both of these, so it's relevant. So Tails can sequence break pretty easily by completing his second stage, which is Casinopolis. He can complete his second stage first before he completes Windy Valley. So normally the order of completion for Tails' stages is Windy Valley, Casinopolis, Ice Cap, Skydeck, Speed Highway. Those are the 5 stages that he completes in that order. However, he can complete the second stage first by clipping, and what happens is the trials menu is subject to not nice, just died. I got to restart this whole cutscene. That's great. The trials menu is subject to given rules. So the first rule is that when the first stage on a character's list, itinerary, whatever you want to. I somehow still haven't developed a standardized term for this. The first stage that a character normally completes prompts the trials menu to actually list stages. So the trials menu will not, by default. Well, first of all, the trials menu is not accessible by default, and then the first stage completion says, "Hey, you can list stages." Okay, that's all you need to know. So in the menu, theoretically, now the stages will be listed, but you still aren't able to access the menu until you complete the second stage. When you complete the second stage in a character's itinerary, then you get access to their trials menu, and you can see the stages now being listed in there. The game, by default, lists one fewer than however many stages you have completed. So if, for instance, you've completed, there was a quick clip to get into Speed Highway fast. If, for instance, you've completed stages 1, 2, and 3, it will display stages 1 and 2. So it will display one fewer stage for gameplay than the most recent one you have completed. So in the case of Tails, if he completed Windy Valley, Casinopolis, and then Ice Cap, the Trials menu will display Windy Valley and then Casinopolis. It won't show Ice Cap. Now, this is subject to the third major rule, which is that when you complete the fifth stage, or as it were, the final stage in a character's itinerary, then the entire list is forced to be revealed as far as that many stage slots must be opened up. So again, completing the first stage lists the stages. Completing the second stage gives you access to the menu. And completing the final stage forces the game to open as many slots as stages you could theoretically complete. So for Tails, when he completes Speed Highway, that tells the game, I need to have 5 slots available for stages. Now, if all of these rules have been working in conjunction, then the game operates normally. So you complete stage 1, then stage 2, and now if you complete stage 1, the menu is not yet open because you haven't completed the second stage. You complete stage 1 and 2, now the menu is open and it just shows the first stage, which for Tails would be Windy Valley. Okay, we're good. Complete stage 3, now it displays stages 1 and 2. Stage 4, stages 1, 2, and 3. When you complete stage 5, though, because it can't be going by this same rule, it has this additional rule, which is now open up 5 slots in the menu so that all 5 stages are available, so that all the stages are done. So we can manipulate these rules through sequence breaking to make the trials menu behave in an abnormal fashion. The most common one is sequence breaking and completing the second stage first. So when you complete the second stage first, so when you complete Tails' second stage, which is Casinopolis first, it prompts the trials menu to open the menu, but no stages will be listed because he did not complete Windy Valley. And because no stages are listed, the trials menu appears blank, which is fun. But what you'll notice is that if you hit accept on this blank menu, as you would if there were stages, it attempts to load you into the default stage. So remember I spoke earlier about how the action stages occupy slots 1 through 11? Well, there is a slot 0. So it appears in code as room 00. And room 00 is the sub-game Hedgehog Hammer, which is a specially designed room for Amy, which it was probably created partially as a fail-safe room, as a backup room, because in Sonic Adventure Original for Dreamcast, there was no room there was no level for stage 00, that address, and the game would just crash. So they created this as partially a fail-safe room. So what's interesting about this fail-safe room is that because you can force the game to take you to byte 00, what you can do is, the great thing about byte 00 is it can be overwritten. So technically what the game is doing there is it's pointing to, it has a byte called next level that it queues up. And normally when you interact with a menu listing in the trials menu, the next level is that menu, is that stage ID. So if it were, this isn't come to mind quickly, but like if it were like Ice Cap, for instance, let's say it would point to 4. I think Ice Cap is 4. So you would, you'd select Ice Cap, and the game would say, okay, next level, we're going to stage address 04, and then boom, you're an Ice Cap. Don't quote me on that because I'm not sure that Ice Cap actually is byte address 04. But the thing with 00 is that now, if you can just find some way to manipulate that next level pointer, then it will overwrite the 00. So if, for instance, you're in another character's menu, and you prompt the game to take you to next level, 01. So if, again, in this circumstance, if Tails has completed his second stage, which is Casinopolis, and his trials menu is blank and it points to 00, I can go over to Sonic's trial menu and select Emerald Coast, and then I can go back to Tails' trials menu and just push A, and the game will read through the 00 byte, and it will see the last next level I queued up, which was Emerald Coast, and it'll put me in Emerald Coast, and boom, I've loaded in Emerald Coast as Tails through the trials menu. Not ever an intended feature of the game, and now I'm in it. So that kind of solves that. That's another way to get around it. So that's called trapped, or trap glitch, and I called it that because in this example of Tails' sequence breaking by completing Casinopolis first, he's physically trapped in the casino area. And I had originally believed it a soft lock until years later I kind of developed a way to escape it. Now, this is just one implementation of trials menu manipulation, which is really what the trap glitch is at its core. And I call this trap variant 1 because it's the first one I found, and it's the simplest. Trap variant 2 is a little more complex, and it does use that rule that I described earlier of the final stage rule. So let's go back to Tails and start over. So we're starting fresh Tails run, and we complete his first stage. Okay, that prompts the menu to list stages. We complete his second stage, Casinopolis, normal so far. That allows us to access the menu. So when we open the menu with these 2 stages complete, we'll just see Windy Valley. Now we can do another thing, which is we can sequence break, and we can clip into Tails' final stage, Speed Highway, and complete that. And when we complete Speed Highway, the game is prompted to do 2 things, basically. It follows the rule, which is open all 5 slots, and it follows the rule of display, how do I say this? Display, the way that it ends up, it's kind of too complex, but you've completed 3 stages total to this point, so it will display 3 stages total, and the 3 stages that it'll choose to display, confusingly, are going to be Windy Valley, Sky Deck, and Speed Highway. So this is Trap Variant 2. I should say that for Trap Variant 1, there are 2 characters who can typically do this, which is Tails and Knuckles can typically do Trap Variant 1 on most versions of the game. I think on all versions of the game. Trap Variant 2, which is this 1, 2, and 5, Tails can do this, and E102 Gamma can do this by default. So Trap Variant 1 opened up 1 slot, and as you'll see later, that 1 slot can be, it's pretty sensitive what we can technically put into that 1 slot. It's pretty restricted. Trap Variant 2 opens up 2 slots, if you might have heard, if you were listening carefully, or maybe I didn't explain it clearly. There will be the 3 stages occupied. So for Tails, it'll be Windy Valley, Sky Deck, and Speed Highway, and then there will be 2 blank spots. So these default levels, Hedgehog Hammer, Area 00. So there will be 2 slots open in his trials menu. Now, you can kind of think of these altered trials menus as being like sheets of paper with holes cut out of them. So in the case of Trap Variant 1, you have a singular hole up top that you have cut out. And you can layer that paper on top of the menu or the paper of a different character, so a normally completed character like Sonic, you can layer this blank slot open over his menu, and it'll take you to Emerald Coast, as I said earlier. And then with Trap Variant 2, you can take this open paper, or this paper, and you'll have slots 4 and 5 cut out, and you can put that over Sonic, his menu, and it'll display his 4th and 5th stages, which are Twilight, Twinkle Park, and Ice Cap. So sorry, that was his 5th and 4th. So in the correct order, if I layer Tails' menu over Sonic's stages, it'll show me Ice Cap in the 4th slot and Twinkle Park in the 5th slot. So in this way, these characters can get access to a whole bunch more stages. We're working our way to Sonic's 8th stage here, by the way. I don't think I did anything super interesting to this point. I am just trying to fill time with all this general explanation, and I'll probably have to go back over all of this anyway when it starts happening. But this is all pretty straightforward. And coming up after Sonic's campaign, we're also going to have a pretty decently straightforward Knuckles campaign. Things will be a little bit different. But that's because these two characters are really the last two to break in the context of getting access to additional stages. There are further restrictions, but kind of Sonic has, mainly because of his access to everything, has really held up as being difficult to kind of manipulate into different stages. And Knuckles as well has certain annoying restrictions, which I'll get into later. Oh wow, good save. It has been, again, I'll reiterate, it's been 4 years since I originally recorded this. So, where was I? Right, so I talked about Trap Variant 1, I talked about Trap Variant 2, and those are both Trials menu manipulations. I also talked about entrance glitches as a way to get into stages. Now I'm going to talk as well about the third and most lucrative glitch, which really kind of blew the game open, because to this point I was trying to get every character into every stage. That was my goal as a kid, was I wanted to get every character into every stage. So Sonic starts with 10, then we got Tails, and through Tails we've kind of with Tails he has 5 normally, and then with the 2 additional trap glitches he gets a couple more stages, and that's pretty cool. And then with Knuckles has Trap Variant 1 as well, which opens some stages up to him. So we're kind of steadily expanding here what we can do. Oh, am I gonna make it out of this? Nope. The next, well, I stopped short of talking about the third most lucrative glitch because I do have one more amendment to Trap Variant 1. So I originally thought Trap Variant 1 was fairly restrictive in that it only gave random access to the first stage a character had. Nice. Which is not entirely true. The game technically gives you access to the, how do I say this? The N-1st stage, where N is the earliest stage other than the first stage you've completed. Okay, so I did say that correctly. So by default, this is always going to be the first stage, because N is going to be 2. So for instance, in Sonic's case, if Sonic's first stage is Emerald Coast, like we saw, and then his second stage is Windy Valley, you're going to complete Emerald Coast, so there's the first stage, and then you're going to complete Windy Valley. And Windy Valley is going to be the second stage. So when I select Sonic, and then I select Tails, who's been modified with Trap Variant 1, that will take me to the N-1st stage, where N is the furthest stage after 1 that I've completed. So in this case, it will be 2, so 2 minus 1 is 1, it'll take me to Emerald Coast. This was an innovation that actually led to Trapped becoming a lot stronger, specifically Trap Variant 1 becoming a lot stronger, which is you can sequence break the source character. So you've got the character that you completed Trap Variant 1 or 2 on, in this case it's Tails, and then you've got the source character, which is Sonic. And it turns out that by sequence breaking Sonic, the source character, you can actually expand what's possible with Tails. So if Sonic completes his stage out of order. So if he does, for instance, if he does Emerald Coast 1, okay, and he needs to do that for the stages to be listed in the Trials menu, in case you remember that condition, then he can complete Casinopolis, which is his third stage. And now what happens is, his menu, even though his menu now, his n-1st stage, where n is the furthest stage after one that he's completed, ends up being his second stage, because it's 3 minus 1, that takes us to the second stage, and that's Windy Valley. So, now, if I were to, theoretically, if I were able to select Sonic, and then I selected Tails, Tails with Trapped 1 would load into Windy Valley. So for Tails, that isn't huge because Tails already goes to Windy Valley, but it is huge as far as that reveals kind of a possible point of exploitation in the code. Hope I don't break. Yeah, okay, cool. So that means that, for instance, Knuckles, who can also get Trap Variant 1, he can go to Windy Valley now because of this exploit, where I sequence break Sonic's character profile. Now I'll take a brief aside here to talk about the fact that I just unlocked Big, and the primary reason why we start with Sonic's campaign in all of this, and why it's pretty vanilla and straightforward, is because in the course of Sonic's story campaign, he meets and unlocks every other character available to play. So we're now going into Stage 9 for Sonic here, and we have unlocked all the other characters, which means that we've opened all these characters on this profile, and we can play them in whatever order we prefer. Except, of course, that Sonic is now mostly completed, but for the most part, it's pretty freeform on which characters' stories you want to do next. Where was I? Right, so sequence breaking, the source character led to a big innovation with Trap Variant 1, because Trap Variant 1, which I previously thought could only select a character's first stage, turns out it can select any stage where the source character can go directly from completing their first stage to completing the stage after that target. And if you didn't quite follow, that's okay. But I had previously believed it was only ever possible through Trap Variant 1 to select a character's first stage, which means that for Sonic it's Emerald Coast, for Tails it's Windy Valley, for Knuckles it's... what is Knuckles? Knuckles is Speed Highway, for Amy it's Twinkle Park, and Big it's also Twinkle Park, and for E102 it is Final Egg. So those were all the stages that I thought were available for Trap Variant 1. And if you think of it like an artist's palette, I thought that I only had those colors. But it turns out that through sequence breaking the source characters, I can add a whole bunch of new colors to my palette for what's available for these characters. So for instance, Sonic now can also provide Windy Valley if you can complete his first and third stage. For Tails, you already heard about how it's possible to complete his first and his fifth stage in that order, which means that from Tails as a source character, you can get Skydeck, which is pretty big, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but, okay. I'm currently navigating my way through this, through this segment of Lost World, which I was never very good at as a kid. I always struggled a lot and died, and it looks like I'm about to die again here. Great, perfect. Let's see. So this sequence breaking the source character also ended up improving Trap Variant 2 in one specific instance. So if you'll remember, Trap Variant 2 gives you access to a character's 4th and 5th stages in their Trials menu by default. And for almost all the characters, that's meaningless because for all 5 characters besides Sonic, they only have 5 stages. So I should say, more specifically, sequence breaking them is meaningless because it's impossible to get anything besides the 4th and 5th stages into the 4th and 5th slots for all of these characters. The only one where you can sequence break and nudge down, or these stages, is for Sonic, because Sonic has more than 5 stages to complete. And very fortunately for Sonic, he does have a sequence break that lets him get at his stages, his much later stages, earlier. So sequence breaking Sonic, and I don't know that I end up doing it in this run specifically, but that is a glitch where you can sequence break Sonic to get access to his, I want to say his 6th and 7th stages. in that 4th and 5th trials menu slot, and that gives access. We'll see. I don't believe that's a thing here. I ended up adding it. I added it as a theoretical routing alternative after this run. For future runs, which I ended up not doing in the intervening years. I was thinking of adding an additional stage, but we'll talk about that later. So, there's still much more to go into. We're 45 minutes in. Let's talk about the fact that we've got entrance glitches. So, as a refresher, physically clipping into the loading zone of a stage, which is not possible generally after Station Square, because they got smart about creating asset portfolios for individual characters in future adventure hubs. Then we have Variant 1, Trap Variant 1, which gives you access to a character's first stage, unless you sequence break them. Trap Variant 2, which, I should say, Trap Variant 1 frees up the first slot in a character's trials menu as open to manipulation. That's a good way to put it. Oh, what am I doing here? Oh no, I'm kind of butchering this puzzle. Okay. Then there's Trap Variant 2, which opens up the 4th and 5th slot. And now we can finally talk about the third glitch, which is kind of the holy grail of glitches, because for me at least, or it was when I first learned about it. So to this point, we've talked about Trap Variant 1 and 2, and you'll notice that it specifically has to do with trials menu manipulation, and that it has an outsized benefit for certain members of the cast. Namely, it's good for characters who have all 5 stages available, and characters who can sequence break to get to future stages in advance. So that's ends up being Tails, Knuckles, and E102. Again, Sonic doesn't really help because Sonic already has access to almost all the stages. I'll come back to that. Cool, hit the death plane there. So the characters that have been kind of the big losers that have not been actually getting any benefits out of all of this are Amy and Big. So for Amy and Big for a while, they kind of seemed like chumps, like they couldn't get access to a lot of access stages. But all that's about to change, because on the PS3 version of the game, which again, I'll remind you is the version I am playing here, on the PS3 version of the game, there's a PS3 exclusive glitch called the quit glitch. And the quick glitch kind of ends up being the most complicated of all of these. But it again has to do with stage ID manipulation. So if we're going back to that stage registry, remember how Hedgehog Hammer is stage 00. Most of the action stages are stages 1 through 11. Remember, those are the action stages. So we can continue to use stage manipulation, but in a new and different manner. And this goes back to the fact that PS3 was built on Big Endian software. And it's kind of crazy, honestly, that I talked about that so early when it's only coming up now. So I apologize. But if you'll remember about Big Endian software and my allusion to this pantry, where you give your guy who goes to the pantry specific instructions, and now you're giving him instructions he was never intended to complete as a consequence of moving over to a different system. Say you got a different guy. That's what we're dealing with on PS3 here. So on PS3, Amy and Big, as on other versions, don't have access to a lot of entrance glitches, so they can't really clip into a lot of places. And both of them have their second stage, their sequence broken second stage. So for Amy, her second stage is Hot Shelter on the Egg Carrier. And for Big, his second stage is Ice Cap in Mystic Ruins. And it's difficult to sequence break, sometimes impossible to sequence break, when your stages are in a different area. So, for instance, for Sonic, perhaps maybe the most infamous case here, Sonic wants to get into Windy Valley as his second stage in order to get access to Trap 1. But that's not possible because... Awesome. That's not possible because Trapped 1, like his second stage, Windy Valley, is in Mystic Ruins, which is a different adventure hub. And in order to get from the Station Square Adventure Hub to the Mystic Ruins Adventure Hub, you need to set in the proper flags to get access to the train, which takes you from the first hub to the second hub. Also, what we're seeing right here is the first reset, and I'll talk about this more in a second. But the idea is that the quit glitch helped Amy and Big because it did not require the sequence breaking that was available to all these other characters. Okay, let's pause the quick glitch and we'll talk about what's happening right now. I have just wrapped up Sonic's campaign, although you'll notice I didn't beat his final boss, Egg Viper, and that's because we don't care about that for the context of the speedrun. The speedrun is all stages, it's max stages, I should say, it's 52 max stages, 52 stages max percent. And Sonic's boss, Egg Viper, is not an action stage, so we don't need to worry about it. We can just complete his 10 action stages the game gives him and then move on. Right there was a quick little clip to get Knuckles into this area. We're starting Knuckles' campaign, by the way. That was a quick little clip to get Knuckles into this area, and then there's a second quick little clip to get Knuckles up on top of this door, and then we can fly around and we can get access to Twinkle Park. So this is the first stage, the first unintended stage that we are seeing. Knuckles is never intended for Twinkle Park, but he can get access to it through those two pretty easy entrance glitches, pretty quick clips. I'm just doing this first in Knuckles' campaign because it's the time when he's closest to the Twinkle Park entrance, so it's just optimal to do it right now. It's also fun to kind of, and a little refresher after coming off of 50 minutes of just doing Sonic's regular campaign to jump over into Knuckles and immediately do a glitch. And Sonic's campaign, by the way, I think speedrunners got it down to like 35 minutes, so 50 minutes for me is alright. I'm probably not going to be able to find 50 minutes time save without endlessly grinding that. So now here we are with Knuckles and Twinkle Park. So you'll notice we saw Twinkle Park earlier with Sonic, and that was with the carts. When Sonic climbed into a cart and then he did this whole course in a cart. Now's the good time to talk about spawning locations. So included in a character's asset portfolio when they come into a given stage is their spawning location. So for Sonic, he has a specific spawning location that puts him where he's supposed to be, up at the top of this race course, and then he can steal a cart and he can go through the cart as usual. Knuckles does not have, for Twinkle Park, he does not have special spawning coordinates. As a result, his spawning coordinates default to 0, 0, 0, which is this point in like open space that you see him spawn at. And it's far below the course, and he essentially had no hope of getting to the course were it not for the fact that he can glide, which he's doing now. So there are characters that have, not all characters are created equal in this game. Knuckles, Tails, and E102 both have excellent mid-air maneuverability options, which they have gliding, flying, and hovering, respectively. And that allows them to get themselves out of jams they wouldn't otherwise be able to. What we just saw there was Knuckles, another trick, which is Knuckles climbing down to trigger the loading zone to Act 2 of this stage. I haven't even gotten to talk about acts yet because there's so much to talk about. But by climbing down, he is able to retain that sort of his status as being clung to a wall, which then allows him to cling to the inside of the wall where he spawns in this area, because again, we're kind of fighting against the fact that he has no default spawning coordinates. And it turns out that spawning coordinates 0, 0, 0 are right inside that wall on Twinkle Park Act 2. Here I'm going to reset again, because I have stopped the timer, and stopping the timer is my only condition for having completed a stage in this game. I need to stop that little timer in the top right, or in the instance of Big, who doesn't have a timer in the top right, I need to see the stopped timer flash as part of the typical stage ending sequence. Now, that was a lot of stuff at once, I didn't really realize, but fortunately, we're now going to resume what I believe is regular Knuckles playthrough. So I should have more time to talk about everything that just happened there. Let's see. All right, so we have spawning coordinates. I think I explained that pretty clearly. Characters, when they load into a stage that they're not intended for, will default to spawning coordinates 0, 0, 0, which most of the time, let's say half of the time it's not an issue. Half of the time the developers built the course such that spawning coordinates 0, 0, 0 are where the normal starting area is. So famously for Emerald Coast, you start at 0, 0, 0, and even if you are, Emerald Coast's default layout as Sonic, the starting spot is 0, 0, 0. So if you load in with an unintended character to Sonic's Emerald Coast, you have no problems because you spawn right at the starting area. On other stages, it's more of an issue. So for instance, on both of those like on Twinkle Park Act 1 and 2, which we just saw. In Act 1, I'm floating out in the void of space, and in Act 2, I spawn inside of a wall. And those would both present extreme challenges were it not for the fact that Knuckles is very fortunate and has a lot of tools available to him to survive those circumstances. Okay, so that's spawning coordinates. We talked earlier, I'm going to talk about this now. We talked earlier about asset portfolios. So asset portfolios refers to when a character loads into a given stage, whether it's an action stage or it's a boss or it is these adventure hubs. They have an asset portfolio. So right there you just saw, if memory serves correctly, you saw that there were rings on that wall that I just climbed up. And that's to kind of goad the player to incentivize them into using Knuckles' ability to climb up that wall because they follow the trail of rings, and then they can turn and fly and hit the button that opens this door. And it's pretty straightforward kind of game design, like, follow the money. And if you'll remember earlier, when Sonic interacted with this area, he had a button to push in that corner. And when he pushed that button, it spawned a row of rings, and then he used his Lightspeed Dash to fly up the row of rings. I'm going to fail to get this emerald. To fly up the line of rings to hit the button to open the door. So different characters have different assets that they spawn in when they load into the level. Also, for another example, is when Sonic loaded this area, this was called Casinopolis Act 1, this area, which I'm just finishing now as Knuckles. When Sonic loaded that, there was none of that stuff up in the top. There was no lion, there was no pirate ships, there were pirate ships, but there were no pirates up in the upper floor. And I never went up there, so I wouldn't blame you for not noticing. But none of that stuff was there as Sonic because it's not part of his asset portfolio. So the way that the devs made the most of reusing the same areas, and they do reuse a lot of areas in the course of this game, is by having different asset portfolios for different characters when they show up. So each character has these different asset portfolios that they prompt the game to load. And the way that it works is that each of these characters has an ID. So you can think of it like they show up with a pass, right? And Sonic shows up with his Sonic pass, and he says, "Give me the Sonic assets," and the game gives him the Sonic assets for a level or a stage. Knuckles shows up with his Knuckles pass, and says, "Give me the Knuckles assets for this area." This is kind of embarrassing. I'm struggling with this boss that normally is perhaps the easiest boss in the entire game. There we go. That's more like it. And Big will show up with his big pass, and he'll say, "Give me the big assets." Sometimes this goes beyond just assets, but I'll come back to that. Now, when you load a character into an unintended stage, so for instance, when I loaded Knuckles into Twinkle Park, which he's never meant to go into, he says, "Hey, here's my Knuckles pass, give me the Knuckles assets." And the game says, "Well, Knuckles, there are no Knuckles assets in this game, in this stage for you." So what do? Fortunately, the game, rather than fail to load any assets, which could happen. So for instance, there would be no enemies, there would be no rings, there would be, importantly, there would be no terminal, which usually marks the end of an action stage. We've seen it a couple times, jumping on I should say capsule rather than terminal. There would be no capsule, right? If Knuckles came in and said, "Here's my asset portfolio, give me my assets," and the game says there's none here. So fortunately what the game does, and this is a real lifesaver and what makes this entire run possible, is that in the event a character shows up with their pass and the game has no assets to give them, it will instead default to Sonic's asset loadout. So Sonic is the universal default asset loadout. So when Knuckles shows up to Twinkle Park and says, "Here's my Knuckles pass," they say, "Okay, here's Sonic's assets." So this is great for a number of reasons. One way that it's not great, which we'll come back to later. One second. Okay. Now, one way that it's not great is that for certain stages where, for instance, Sonic has no assets. One example that comes to mind is in Hot Shelter. In Hot Shelter, Sonic is never intended to go there, so Sonic has no asset portfolio for Hot Shelter. So when a character that is not intended for Hot Shelter, say Tails, when Tails loads in Hot Shelter, which is stage 1-1 in memory, or anyway. So when Tails loads Hot Shelter, He has no assets because the game does not have Sonic's assets to provide him. Which means that the game is the level is just geometry. So there's no capsule to finish, there's no enemies, there's no loading triggers to take you to the next act of Hot Shelter, and it's a wash, and it's a shame, because it would be a lot of fun to play Hot Shelter, and it was always a big goal of mine as a kid to get different stages into Hot Shelter, not least of which being Sonic. I had always really wanted to get Sonic into Hot Shelter, because it's the only stage he can't complete, or the only stage he can't even get access to, rather. So all this is to say, and Knuckles' campaign, you'll notice, is going by much faster than Sonic's campaign. Knuckles' stages take much less time, and he also only has 5 stages. So that's the idea of, that's the gimmick of asset portfolio. So asset portfolio, character-specific asset portfolios, also called CSAPs. Just kidding, I just made that up. Those apply to adventure hubs. Those apply to individual stages. Those apply to bosses. They apply wherever, because wherever the character brings their ID, they're going to prompt the game to load the assets for that character ID. So, we've spoken about spawning coordinates being linked to asset portfolios, and we've spoken about characters having specific asset portfolios that they take to each of these levels. I'm forgetting what I wanted to talk about next. I think, yes, I wanted to talk about acts next. So, remember we spoke earlier about a stage registry that I keep coming back to. So mainly for action stages is what we're concerned about for the course of this run. Action stages occupy slots 1 to 11 in the registry. But then there's additionally, those are kind of, if we're talking books, then each of these also has subsequent chapters. So for instance, Emerald Coast has its stage. So it's stage 0-1, and then in addition to being stage 0-1, it also has acts within it. And you watched that happen for the first time when I played through Emerald Coast for the first time with Sonic. You might not have noticed it, but essentially the game had this first area, which was the open beach area, and then I went through into the second area, which was sort of like a grovey cliffside, where the game ended, where the level ended. Most stages have 3 acts. Some have more, some have less, and each of these acts features its own kind of layout, and it has its own gimmick. And some of them most of them have their own title. These acts have titles, which are usually just derived from the song that plays in those acts, because each of the acts usually has its own music. I used to have them all memorized. I don't have them all memorized for you right now, but I believe like Emerald Coast's first act, I think, is like Azure Blue or something. It's like Blue is Your Coast, and then the second one is like Grove. So that's how you can kind of internally refer to them. Twinkle Park, the second area famously is called Twinkle Castle, and then the track for Amy's unique act, which we'll talk about, her act, which is which is Twinkle Park Act 3, is called Fakery Way. So you have Twinkle Castle, and then you have Fakery Way for Amy. I can't remember what the original track for Twinkle Park is called, the Act 1 track. But anyway, these acts each have their own kind of identities, and in certain circumstances, so for instance, in the case of Twinkle Park, Sonic goes to Act 1 in Twinkle Park, and he is the only one of the characters that access Twinkle Park that has access to Act 1. Then we have Twinkle Park Act 2, which is Twinkle Castle, and that's where Amy and Big start Twinkle Park. That's where they begin the stage. So in Twinkle Park Act 1, Sonic alone has an asset portfolio. Now, as we've discussed, that's not really a huge concern, because Sonic's asset portfolio is the default. So, and it always is the default, even in stages where other characters can access, or other characters have asset portfolios, they will always default to Sonic's if they're not intended to be there. So then in Act 2, Sonic has an asset portfolio, but Big has an asset portfolio as well, because if you're familiar with this game, Big has a fishing minigame. So for instance, the game needs to spawn all these fish to go swimming around in the pond. Those are not there as Sonic, because he can't interact with the fish anyway, and it would kind of be a waste of resources and a distraction. So Big has his own asset portfolio, also referring to Act 2 of Twinkle Park. So this is all to say that not only are the character IDs, not only do the character IDs prompt asset portfolios specific to the stage, they also prompt assets specific to the act within the stage. So here, as another great example, we already saw Sonic run through this area, and this is Lost World Act 2, and we are now seeing Knuckles play through it with a totally different asset portfolio, which includes different enemies, and I'm struggling a lot with this hut for some reason. Includes different enemies and includes emeralds, which would not be available for Sonic. You just saw me there switch from auto camera to free camera, and this is kind of a recurring thing, so I'll just address it now. There's a lot of controversy in this community over which camera is best. Some people like auto camera, some people like free camera. Me personally, I usually default to free camera. Maybe because I spend so much time clipping through walls, I find it a lot easier to find my character and follow what they're doing with free camera. So free camera is on by default a lot of the time. There are certain instances where auto camera is better. Speedrunners generally do kind of prefer auto camera because auto camera is consistent. So auto camera follows specific triggers, like for instance when Knuckles, when Knuckles was crossing this bridge, if we were on auto camera, the camera might by default zoom out and kind of set itself to a certain angle, and that helps speedrunners have consistency in their tricks, whereas free camera is totally custom, and it's maybe hard to kind of granularly adjust how the angle of your free camera. So that was free and auto camera addressed real quick. You'll see me continue to switch between them. There aren't a ton of instances where it's super relevant, but sometimes when I'm struggling, I'll switch. When I'm struggling to find my character. The camera in this game is notoriously bad. It is another impediment to why I haven't been playing much on the Dreamcast version, because in the Dreamcast version, there is only auto camera. You have no option to gain control of the camera, unless you install a mod, maybe. But that has been the camera in this game is notoriously difficult to work with, and in a game like Adventure for Dreamcast, where you don't even have the option to give yourself control, it can be very frustrating. Something fun about Lost World, which I'll just address now, is that Lost World has that front entrance, which Sonic goes into, which is the snake, and it has the back entrance, which Knuckles goes into by using those two different little monkey statues. I've always thought that was a fun bit of game design, that there's two different ways in. So here we're going to Skydeck. Skydeck is Knuckles' final level. And I don't know, I don't even know if this ends up saving me any time. But essentially what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have Knuckles walk up front, and he witnesses a cutscene of the ship changing shape. And then this pool drains, and then you can get access to this door at the bottom of the pool. And then by walking through this door, normally Knuckles gets access to Skydeck. However, because I just feel like having fun, I end up doing this little clip, which is possible with some other characters, where you fall through and you fall down at such an angle that your character model is sort of slightly outside the bounds of the wall, and then you can walk right through the door, or walk right through the wall above the door. It's finicky. It's not consistent. Maybe if you sat and labbed for a while. Okay, I end up giving up here because it is stupid and I'm just wasting time. In a vacuum, it would save you like 3 seconds if you could nail it perfect. No, it would save you longer because I have to sit through this whole cutscene. So it would save you 12 seconds maybe if you manage to nail it first try. Unfortunately, I suck and I was not able to nail it after 8 tries. It's also worth noting that would soft lock your game, so it's not really smart to do in a regular speedrun. Fortunately, here we don't care about completing the campaign after we complete Skydeck as Knuckles, because Skydeck is Knuckles' 5th stage, and after we finish it and we see the timer stop, we have, for the purposes of this run, finished with Knuckles' campaign. So normally, of course, Knuckles has like a final boss, and he has like an ending cutscene, and if you're playing a normal speedrun, those would probably be important to you. Fortunately, we're playing this kind of a Willy Wonka, goofy Mickey Mouse speedrun, and we don't really care so much about what happens after we've finished our final stage. I wonder how long this one takes me. This one can be pretty difficult, even casually and in a speedrun context. Skydeck is probably Knuckles' most difficult level, because it involves this whole gravity manipulation gimmick up top. Again, another instance of character-specific asset portfolio. You don't see this gravity lever on Sonic's version of this stage. Although I should note, actually, this is actually probably relevant. I should note, this, even though it looks very much like Sonic's Skydeck Act 3, this is actually secretly a different act, if memory serves. So in certain circumstances, so while most of the time it's sufficient for the character-specific asset portfolio alone to change between characters. So for instance, like in Speed Highway Act 3, which is called At Dawn, and I do remember that being the title. If you'll remember, that's the one that takes place in kind of like Town Square-ish, that Knuckles and Sonic both go to. So we already saw Sonic run through there, and we saw Knuckles run through there as his first stage. That was Speed Highway Act 3 At Dawn. Here I could reset. I don't know why I'm not doing it yet. When will I learn? Okay, all right, I'm just going to quit. Okay, I ended up opting against resetting. I've just quit out. So that's fine. So, whereas normally it's sufficient to just have a different asset portfolio to distinguish the gameplay when you go to, for instance, Speed Highway Act 3, sometimes the differences in the playstyle and the assets and everything else are so wildly different, specifically when they want to change the geometry, because as far as I'm aware, they can't really change the geometry while keeping it as the same stage. It would need to be while keeping it as the same act. It needs to be a different act if they want to change the geometry of the stage. One example of this is Big. His Emerald Coast he has a specific act of Emerald Coast just for himself, called Emerald Coast Act 3, which is subtitled Big Fishin', which is different from Azure Blue Coast, even though there is an area of Azure Blue Coast that resembles Big Fishin'. Specifically, the lighthouse is the same. They're actually two, because they have such wildly different geometry, they're two different acts. This will come up later when we are applying the trapped glitch, because the trapped glitch actually references both the act that you want to load and it references both the stage you want to load and the act of that stage. So if we wanted to, and this is relevant because, for instance, like say we wanted to put Tails into Emerald Coast. Okay, well, we could do that. Let's hypothetically say we could do that with Sonic's Emerald Coast. So we can go to Sonic's menu and we can grab his Emerald Coast, which starts in Act 1, which, because of the confusing way that things are laid out in memory, it's technically address 00. Don't worry about that. That's not super relevant. But if we wanted to load Tails into that, or we could even use, if we wanted to load Tails into Sonic's Emerald Coast, he would load us into this Act 1 Azure Blue Coast area that we're navigating through right now with E102 Gamma. But if we took Emerald Coast if we selected the Emerald Coast from Big's menu, it would take us to the Big Fishin' act, which is very different. And notably, as we remember, we talked about asset portfolios, Sonic does not have an asset portfolio for Emerald Coast Act 3 Big Fishin'. Only Big has an asset portfolio there. So if Tails loaded in, he would show his Tails pass to the game and say, "Give me the Tails assets," and the game would say, "Well, here are Sonic's assets," and the page and the stage would be blank except for geometry. Also, Big Fishin' spawns you like way under the stage. 00, the default character address, is like way beneath the stage and outside of bounds, so that won't help either. So all these headaches, all these obstacles, all this, there's sort of this whole, collected priesthood of information that you just have to learn, and that I've gradually learned. I basically have a PhD in this game. Maybe not to the extent some other people do. Some other people probably have. I guess you could say I have a master's in this game. Some people have PhDs. So what we're going to do here is a convenient little trick. So whereas with Knuckles and Sonic we played a pretty straightforward campaign, with E102 Gamma we're going to do a bit of sequence breaking. So we've intended E102 to do sequence breaking from the beginning. So what we've seen thus far is we've seen E102 Gamma complete his first stage, which was Final Egg, and we completed E102 Gamma's second stage, which is Emerald Coast. And now what we're doing here is we're performing a trick to complete Gamma's 5th stage. And for everyone paying attention, here's your quiz. What glitch are we activating by completing E102's 1st, 2nd, and 5th stage in that order? I'll give you a second to think about it. It's Trap Variant 2. So what we're doing right now is we are finally setting up Trap Variant 2, which I talked about when we were playing through Sonic's campaign, by completing E102 Gamma's 1st, 2nd, and 5th stage. Now, this is going to be the real proper beginning. We saw a glimpse of it earlier with Knuckles when Knuckles completed Twinkle Park, but this is our first real taste of kind of how the rest of this run is going to go. So this run kind of starts up pretty slowly and consistently by just a regular vanilla playthrough of Sonic's campaign, and then things kind of start to get off the rails around this point. So hang on, I gotta lock in. We're talking about the quick glitch here. So this is actually going to set up two things. So by completing E102's 1st, 2nd, and 5th stage right now, we're setting up Trap Variant 2. I already talked about that. So that's going to free up in the Trials menu, that's going to free up E102 Gamma's 4th and 5th slot to load in some other different stages, which we're going to do in a minute. But I am also going to, immediately after doing this, I'm going to set up the quit glitch. So, the quit glitch is exclusive to the PS3 version of the game. And it has to do with that whole big Endian thing. When any character who is not intended to complete Casinopolis, the stage Casinopolis in Station Square. So we're talking E102 Gamma, we're talking Big and Amy. When any of those three characters complete Casinopolis, on the GameCube version and on the PC version, the game loads you into when they complete the stage. So, gosh, there's so much to go into here with Quick Glitch. Quick Glitch refers to the fact that when you complete a stage, the game has a drop table. Really, it has two drop tables, what I call drop tables, which is where the game thinks to drop you after you have completed a stage. So normally, the drop address of a stage is pretty straightforward. So for instance, for Emerald Coast, when you complete Emerald Coast, the game says, okay, you've completed Emerald Coast, I'm going to drop this character right out front of Emerald Coast. Bing, bang, boom. And it stores that address in memory. So naturally, when characters complete a stage that they were never intended to complete, so for instance, when Knuckles completes Twinkle Park, the game says, okay, where do I drop you? It goes to its drop table. It doesn't see any place to drop Knuckles, and then it drops him in an unintended location. Fortunately for Knuckles, the drop tables for Station Square are pretty straightforward, except for Casinopolis. This has to do with, sorry, you know what? Let me, gosh. The drop tables for the first couple of stages that the devs made. The drop tables for the first few stages the devs made. All right, that's important to understand. The first few stages the devs made, the drop tables are stable. So even if Knuckles completes Twinkle Park, which he's never supposed to complete, the game has a stable drop address for him because the drop table always shows the spot right outside Twinkle Park. So by completing Twinkle Park with Tails, Knuckles, and E102, who are never intended to go there, if you do that by completing those, in the adventure mode, the game drops you outside of those stages with no issue. But Casinopolis got made later. Casinopolis, I believe, got made, I think it's level 8 in the registry. So it's action stage 8, when normally it's the 3rd that you interact with, but it's the 8th because they made it later, the devs made it later. And because they made it later, they ended up not caring so much about tending to the drop table for unintended characters. So if you're E102, Amy, or Big, when you complete Casinopolis, the drop address for Casinopolis is garbage data. I'll take a brief aside here to talk about what I'm doing. I'm exploiting these buttons in the hotel to generate an infinite number of rings although I don't need an infinite number, I only need 400, because if you'll remember, getting 400 rings is needed to complete Casinopolis. You need to have 400 rings to be, they have to shake those coins out of you, and then you climb those rings to get up to the emerald or the capsule, whichever it is. So right now I'm having E102 gather all 400 rings he's going to need, because E102 cannot properly interact with the pinball machines inside of Casinopolis. And because he can't properly interact with the pinball machines inside of Casinopolis, I need to gather the rings here in the Adventure Hub and then take them into the action stage, which is an extremely rare thing to ever have to do. In fact, I think it's the only time I ever have to do it. But it's a cool feature that you carry the rings over from Adventure Hub into the action stage, and this is the only instance where it's actually relevant. Okay, talking about that for a minute. Back to the quick glitch. So the quick glitch. When you complete Casinopolis with any of these three characters, the game does not have an address to drop you at, so it looks into the garbage data and it returns a garbage address to drop your character at. Now, on GameCube, Nintendo, and PC, the game drops you at a totally impossible address, which is the Chaos Zero fight. So it goes to the Chaos Zero fight, which is a boss level. That was the first thing we ever saw in this game. That was Sonic fighting Chaos Zero in his little arena. So it tries to put you in that arena in Act 16. And Act 16, the game just can't handle that. And what happens is the game just crashes. So on GameCube, on PC, on those two versions, those two ports, when you complete Casinopolis as Amy, for instance, it puts you into this garbage address. It crashes the game, and it hard locks. It soft locks, but it's really impossible to undo. It totally ruins your save file. So right now I'm struggling with this burger statue, which I'm kind of embarrassed about because I ended up learning a more efficient version of this trick later. So you're gonna have to suffer through me messing up this trick a couple of times. But anyway, but on PS3, because it's Big Endian, remember going all the way back to the allegory of the man with the pantry. Because this is Big Endian, instead it reads the address in a different way. It reads the garbage data in a different way, and it returns the null byte. So it returns 00 as the address where it's intended to drop you. And if alarm bells should be going off in your head if you remember the trap glitch, because the trap glitch only works because the null byte is provided for in the menu. It's the game gives you the null byte in the menu, and that's what makes the trap glitch possible, because you can overwrite the null byte with other stage data, and the quick glitch is no different. So here with the quick glitch, we've just clipped out using the Burger Man. Again, I found a way to do it without the Burger Man statue. We use the Burger Man statue for a lot of clips just because it's an object with a lot of polygons, so you can kind of move it around, or polyhedra, I don't know. It's got mass, so you can take it and use it to clip out of the stage. So here we're grabbing the emerald, and more about the emerald later. But the fact that I just grabbed an emerald there is important. So you see me split there. We're an hour and 23 minutes into the run. I've just completed Casinopolis with E102. So the stage count, I also have the stage counts notated on the right. So that was the 20th stage that I have completed. And again, our goal is 52 on our original plan. So, the quick glitch. So now that I have completed Casinopolis with E102, the game has my drop address for E102's adventure campaign stored as 00, the null byte. So when I try to load in, it will load me directly into the Hedgehog Hammer test room, which we won't see right now, but you will see it later. And then the quit glitch comes in, because when you try to quit from the null byte, stage 00, quitting takes you to the next level byte, the next level pointer. And if you'll remember, the next level is not exactly the same. Sorry, it's a different pointer, but it does take you to, let's call it the selected level pointer. So whereas the trap glitch takes you to the next level pointer, the quick glitch takes you to the selected level pointer, which is even more broken than the trap glitch. Because the trap glitch had all these specific restrictions on, oh, it needs to be in this slot of the trials menu, and you need to, if you're going to do that, you need to sequence break the source character. None of that is important with the quick glitch. With the quick glitch, it's like all powerful. If you select any level in the trial in the trials menu, which includes like bosses, and sub games, if you select any level, and then you go to the quit character, you load up their adventure stage, the game says, what's your drop address? 00, puts you in the 00 room, and then you quit. When you quit, the game will take you to the last selected level. Now, why does it do this? It does this because normally the game has two kind of means of thinking about levels. The game can think about a level as an action stage, or it can think about it as an adventure hub. And the game, if memory serves, I believe the game sort of misreads the Hedgehog Hammer Null Byte room, the test room, the failsafe room. It misreads that room as an adventure hub. And then when you try to quit, it takes you to, or sorry, no, it reads it properly as a level. Let me correct myself. It reads it properly as a level. And then because it's reading it as a level, it says, okay, if you're trying to leave this game, let me take you to your adventure hub where you're supposed to go. Of course, we never had an adventure hub to begin with because we're in Null Byte 00. So when we quit, it takes us to our last selected level. So through all of this wizardry, basically, we can get access to additional stages. And you'll see more instances of it later, so don't sweat it if you didn't fully understand. I barely understand it. And frankly, I had all these really convoluted diagrams to try to understand it myself back in the day, before I eventually kind of simplified it. A lot of this stuff has been trial and error for me. It wasn't until I was kind of in my mid-20s that I really started getting insight into how the game actually handles all of this from a data perspective. But the years kind of fly by. So here we're still doing a pretty straightforward Big campaign. We've completed Big's first stage, we're completing his second stage now. All this is pretty straightforward. I don't remember exactly what routing I chose to do here, but it looks like we're about to just continue normally. So next up, we're going to be completing ice cap. So I've talked a lot about stage access because that was originally the goal, as I've alluded to numerous times. When I was a kid, I just wanted to get access to these stages. I just wanted the joy of seeing a character in a stage where they didn't belong. But as time went on, I eventually got kind of better at this game, and I realized, oh, there's more to be done here than just getting these characters into these stages. You know, in some instances, these characters can actually complete these stages, and that provides an additional challenge. And that was a lot of fun. And now, partially this was also motivated by the fact that through all of these glitches, and an additional glitch that I haven't even talked about yet, an additional overarching glitch, which isn't relevant to this run, but I will talk about. Through all of these glitches and more, I did eventually fulfill my childhood dream of getting every character into every stage. Without ever hacking, naturally, by glitching. But the thing that I discovered was that in addition to this, I kind of wanted to set a new quest. And my new quest was, to the extent possible, I want to find ways to complete these stages with these characters. Because that'd be fun to do. And it is fun. Generally it's fun. Sometimes it's agonizing. Sometimes I want to tear all the hair off of my head because of certain stages, which actually are coming up imminently, that cause me tremendous agony. So here we're still playing normally through Big, and Big was really the major obstacle to all of this for a very long time. Big was the last nut to crack, as it were, because I first found the Trap Variant 1, then I found Trap Variant 2, then I found sequence breaking the trapped characters, and then I found out about Quit Glitch because of some obscure videos on YouTube. So obscure. I'm talking fewer than 60 views, which were uploaded by a user called Ant. So Ant uploaded these videos, and then I still remember to this day, the titles of the two videos were Eggs and World's Best Mom. I believe Eggs has since been delisted. I don't know if it was got flagged for copyright or whatever. I'll come back to this in a second. Here's the clip, the major clip. I got to talk about this as well. But talking about Ant. So Ant featured on his channel E102 Gamma performing tricks that I would never have thought possible. Basically, he was performing the quick glitch, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And what had happened was that Ant on his own time had, on the PS3 version, glitched E102 into Casinopolis and completed Casinopolis, and then had activated the quick glitch and then was using it to manipulate it to drop E102 into lots of different stages. None of this was explained. There's the clip, by the way. Everybody cheer, everybody applaud and cry and scream. And here's the second clip to actually get big into the level, which I think I nail kind of early on. Hopefully I don't die. So I first saw Ant accomplishing this with E102, which was huge. And I reached out to Ant and I said, Ant, please give me your wisdom. Please explain to me how this is possible. How can it be that you can do these things, this wizardry? And Ant basically gate kept me and was like, well, if you can't figure it out for yourself, I'm not going to bother to explain it to you. And other completely mystic riddles. And for a while, that was just kind of where I left it. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm never going to understand. And then I eventually kind of got around to getting the PS3 version, because I did some sleuthing and I saw that they were PS3 menus that he was using to interact with. He was using the PlayStation home button menu and stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is the PlayStation version. Must be PlayStation exclusive, because I couldn't replicate it on my GameCube, on my PC version, on my GameCube emulation. I couldn't do anything. I was completely incapable of replicating what Ant had done until I finally did the sleuthing and I discovered that it was on PS3. And then I caved and I bought the PS3 arcade version, which I don't even think is available for sale anymore. So I've got in my possession one of the last few instances of it, although you can emulate it. So what we're seeing right now is big in Casinopolis, by the way. And oh my gosh. So Ant is the one who eventually led to me discovering Quick Glitch. More about him later. Let's talk about big in Casinopolis. Holy moly. For over 7, maybe 6, 7 years of my life, I knew that it was possible for Big to get into Casinopolis because the loading zone was there. Remember we discussed earlier, and here I'm grabbing the emerald, and I'll have to talk about that in a minute too, so we've got a couple of things on the stack here. But we talked earlier about how the devs in the earlier levels, namely in Station Square, had these physical barriers to the loading zones, but the loading zones were always there. So I knew through hacking, I knew that I could moon jump over the collision and I could get big into the loading zone. So I knew the loading zone was there. If I could just discover the right clips to get big into Casinopolis, then I could have access to it. And I originally, and this was at a very early time. This was before I even knew very much about the trap glitches. I was thought that this was the only way that I was ever going to get big into Casinopolis, and this was the only way that it was ever going to happen. Oh, here we're seeing our first quick glitch load. All right, this is massive. So I've selected Lost World. Now I'm going to tab back over to big, and you're going to see the quick glitch in action. Everybody, pay close attention. All right, so I'm at Hedgehog Hammer. I'm in the default Null Blade 00. I quit. Game doesn't know where to put me, and it puts me in a Lost World. So I've spawned in Lost World. I've spawned in Knuckles' Act of Lost World. So Knuckles, if you remember, starts in Act 2 of Lost World. I've showed the game my Big Pass. I say, I'm Big the Cat, give me my Big the Cat assets. The game says, I don't have Big the Cat assets. Here are Sonic's assets. So I'm now playing Sonic's version of Lost World in Act 2, which is where Knuckles begins. I have spawned under the level, which would normally kill me, because I've spawned at coordinates 0, 0, so Big loads into coordinates 0, 0. But fortunately, because he has the flotation belt, and it's crazy that this is a thing, because he has the flotation belt, and because this area is designated as underwater, I can swim around to the area where I need to be, and then I can successfully get back inside of the stage geometry. So right now and the reason I'm bobbing up and down like this is because I'm underneath a kill plane, and if I float up into the kill plane, it will kill me instantly. Which would be very counterproductive. So instead, I'm kind of gradually wiggling my way back over, and we saw this earlier when I played through this level with Sonic. We are now in this waterfall section. So I'm inside the stage geometry, and now I'm playing as Big in Lost World. So I'm going to talk about one more exploit that we kind of do in this level to make this pop. Oh, actually, no, I've got to talk about 2 more things. Okay, it's just reminded me. So Big is very slow, and Big is so slow, and he's so difficult to manipulate, to control, and he has so limited options that frankly, the flotation belt was just a miracle. It was nothing short of a miracle that the flotation belt interaction happened because of the water on the stage. But it is generally, as a rule, extremely difficult to have Big do anything interesting. He's basically just designed to walk around next to the water and fish. And given that we are, again, playing Sonic's asset portfolio, it is very difficult to make Big functional in a Sonic context, because Sonic is very maneuverable and fast, and Big is exactly the opposite. So there's an additional level of challenge here, which is trying to keep Big alive. Earlier there, you saw me miss the springs, so I reloaded. This segment, it took a lot of practice, and honestly, it's kind of an obstacle to me ever returning to run this again regularly, because it was such an agony to learn how to do this. This one and his Sky Deck, which I think is coming up immediately after this, are probably the two hardest sections of the game. So I'm going to talk you through the rest of this real quick. So hopefully I get it on this one. I think I do. I have to pause buffer. No, I died. All right, so because I died, I have a little bit more time. I'm going to talk about the fact that E102, Gamma, and Big both grabbed an emerald in the Casinopolis level, which you might have seen. So normally on a character's first story playthrough of the level, so I should say not a character, but in Sonic and Tails, when Sonic and Tails first play through their action stages, the first thing that appears for them is an emerald. And then on replays, because that's in conjunction with the story, and then on replays, it's a capsule. So on any time trials or anything, it'll be a capsule instead of an emerald. Or, for instance, with Tails, so at the end of Emerald Coast, when Sonic first plays through it, he finds Tails at the end next to a crash plane. But then in future playthroughs, it's a capsule. So here I had to use pause buffering, not literally, but almost frame-perfect movement in order to get Big over that gap. So I successfully gotten over that gap. I take kind of a vain swing at this caterpillar with my fishing rod. So normally, as I've said, the game will load Sonic's assets. But there's a bit of a quirk, which is that when the game is determining whether you have, with an unintended character, when you bring an unintended character to a stage, when the game is determining have you been here before, it looks to whether or not Tails has completed his first stage. I don't know why, I can't explain it, but if Tails has completed his first stage, then on every stage that you go to with an unintended character, then rather than an emerald, there will be a capsule there. In instances where there was originally an emerald. So we'll see later with Sky Deck. On Sky Deck, it's always been a capsule. Sonic always completes a capsule, even on his first run. So the reason that I have to defer Tails until way later in this campaign, not accepting the fact that he's actually way easier to play than these other characters, which I would rather get out of the way first. Tails also, if you complete Tails' first stage, then it will prompt a capsule to spawn in Sonic's asset portfolio for Casinopolis rather than an emerald, which then means that you have to get up onto the capsule. Now for E102, this is no issue. E102 can just climb on a capsule, it's no big deal. Big cannot, his jump height is less than the capsule. He can, again, I had to do another I had to do another pause buffered, almost frame perfect fall there to manage to get into this area to get to the next section. So here I actually have to use this torch. I have to climb onto this torch to then jump onto the capsule. It looks like Big should be able to jump onto the capsule. I agree with you, he really should be. He can't. It's just a little bit too high. And because it's just a little bit too high, I have to go out of my way to make sure I don't finish Tails' first stage until after I've done Big's campaign so that he can grab an emerald in Casinopolis so that it makes the quick glitch work so that all of this is possible for Big. In every other instance where Big has to climb onto a capsule, mercifully, there is some kind of collision nearby, or there's some way to get around the fact that Big can't jump up on top of the capsule. He cannot, his verts are simply insufficient. Now, that was the 20-something stage that we completed with Big. That was completing Lost World. Now we're selecting Knuckles' Sky Deck. So we select Knuckles' Sky Deck because Knuckles starts his Sky Deck in Act 3, which is much more preferable than starting it in Act 1. So I guess I have to walk back what I said earlier about it being a different geometry. It's not a different geometry, although there are specific weird interactions. So the reason I said that was specifically because when you load in Knuckles' Sky Deck with Tails, there are no assets, and this might be a quirk of the fact that Tails was originally intended to have an asset portfolio for Act 3 in Sky Deck, because he does normally play through Sky Deck Act 1, So the devs might have been like, oh, let's make, let's have Tails go to Acts 2 and 3, and then just like change their mind before they actually gave Tails any assets or copied anything over. All right, so here's how you have to play this level with Big. You have to come over here, you have to hit the gravity switch, and then you immediately have to make your way onto this deck, onto this track, which normally you run down with Sonic. So now we're climbing kind of back up / across them with Big. And both Big's Lost World and Sky Deck very much tax my patience, very much tax my capacity to use my lives, my extra lives. So I try to be pretty sparing with my extra lives here, which means that I'm just going to physically run down and run back up every time I mess up. This requires very precise controller movements. You have to turn around and then jump specifically back onto this ledge. And now's a good time to talk about this. This method of completing the stage, as well as the method of getting into Casinopolis for the first time, were both labbed out and figured out by my friends and fellow Sonic Adventure DX glitch enjoyers, Pasta Nova, and Scoob. So these two guys together designed these skips. They designed the clip to get big into Casinopolis, which had been a holy grail for so long for me. And they designed Pasta Nova designed this this way of completing this stage with Big. So, we're now just, I think I'm pretty much caught up on all the things I had to talk about, which is good because we were pretty behind there for a minute. I was kind of rushing to keep up. This is agonizing. I think I wasted 30 minutes on this stage on my previous speedrun. I mean, like, if you get, on my previous max percent attempt, if you get very good with it, theoretically it should only take you, like, I mean, if you do it first try, if you do all the tricks that I've shown thus far the first try, you could save 18 minutes, maybe. I'm just not up to that. I'm just not up to scratch. I'm not up to that caliber. You can see me consistently screw up here. I'm probably getting pretty tilted because I almost had it the first time and I missed the drop. I kind of am seeing the time slip away before me. But here we're going to, I think this is the successful one. I think I managed to get it on this one. Controller movements are pretty precise again. Yeah, I even managed to survive a messed up jump there. So the goal is that I kind of had to walk over and then, very annoyingly, this is one instance where even with free camera, the game forcibly changes your camera perspective. And when the game forcibly changes your camera perspective in this game, it does change the direction of your input. So you could be holding, I'm going to be holding toward the camera, I'm going to be holding down here to drop. And then the moment that the game changes my angle, it will change it to, yeah, here, I missed it again. Wow, that's terrible. That is, I'm super tilted now, I remember. When the game changes your angle there, as it did just there, you saw the game snap the camera to change it to be a different perspective on the capsule. It changes the directionality of my input, so or it changes, you know, the way that my down input is read. So instead, I would be walking like towards the camera there. Mercifully, I do believe that this is the last really difficult trick. This is the last really hard one. After this, everything's kind of gravy. This one is agonizing, but I'm sure you've heard enough of me complaining, so I'll just kind of let the rest of this play out. Big in Casinopolis was a meme among myself and all of my friends, my internet friends, my real-life friends. Everybody knew that I wanted to get big into Casinopolis. It was a dream forever. Because I knew that it was possible. Little did I know that it actually hid this incredible trick of Quick Glitch, which makes so much of this possible. And there's kind of conversations about this. So I've always kind of seen a parallel between my max stages obsession, my max percent stages, and the A button challenge in Mario 64 speedrunning, which maybe any of the 3 people watching this video might also see the connection. And the kind of obsessiveness with which I pursued it, the kind of single-mindedness, and also the kind of shared community that sprung up around it. So like Scoob and Pasta's contributions really made this special. But also the fact that the idea, it almost feels in some instances in the ways as you like learn your way around the game that the devs sort of intended this. You kind of get a conspiratorial mindset, like, oh, they knew that. Here I'm completing Final Egg with Big, where I just kind of drop right in. I should really memorize what input I need because it's really straightforward. I'm just supposed to like hold one direction and then I'll land right on where I'm supposed to go. But anyway, it can feel in some cases that the devs almost designed the game this way, like with these glitches in mind, because, you know, where the trap glitches don't cover, namely like Big and Amy, you have to use the quick glitches, and so on. Like, you kind of need all these things in conversation with each other in order to be able to achieve the goal of getting into every stage. And then from there, the goal of trying to complete as many stages as possible. There are some instances where it's just not possible with the current knowledge that we have. There's no way to, for instance, with Sonic, there's no way to prompt the game to load, I don't know, say, E102's asset portfolio with Sonic for Hot Shelter. So Sonic will never be able to navigate the loading zones in Hot Shelter, and so on. So I keep narrowly missing this landing platform. You can see I basically have infinite lives, and the lives keep getting set back to 0. This is because of an interaction with, oh, look at that, I made it. This is because of an interaction with Hedgehog Hammer. Hedgehog Hammer as a sub-level always sets, as a test level, always sets your lives to 0. Or sorry, sets your lives to 4. Don't know why. But it is handy because it means fewer game over screens. There's a lot of strange things going on with the test level, sometimes called test level, failsafe level, Hedgehog Hammer, that's 0-0. Strange things going on. There was kind of originally a test course outside of the level. You can see that they were modeling some of the loop-de-loops that later get used in Sonic's campaign. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Oh, I'm going to just Big's Adventure mode. All right, so I've loaded Twinkle. Okay, right. So I've loaded Twinkle Park for Big, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete Twinkle Park, which is Big's own stage normally, and this will get him out of the quick glitch. So normally the quick glitch does kind of soft lock you, but what I'm doing here is I'm making it so that I'm forcing the game to drop me back in to an adventure hub. In this case, I'm dropping back into Station Square by using Twinkle Park. So I'll complete. Froggy's giving us some trouble. I'll complete Big's first stage a second time here, and then that will get me to. That will bring me back to the Station Square Adventure Hub. Here we are.
Welcome to Twinkle Park.
All right, so now, we're just going to resume kind of what we were doing, business as usual. I believe I still have to complete Emerald Coast, and then Emerald Coast will take me to Hot Shelter, and all the story flags and the progression should be totally fine, because we didn't really do any sequence breaking. We just completed Casinopolis, which is an unintended stage, which gave us access to the quick glitch to do all that different stuff. So down there in the bottom right, not in great quality, you can see my kind of Word document planning out all these different stages, and you can see I refer to the stages by the kind of an acronym or of their title, and then I refer to the acts within the stage by the number, because that's just the way that I learned it. That's the way that it's convenient for me to keep track of. Sometimes, rather than a number for the act, I will have a letter. So, for instance, for Ice Cap, you might see down there, stage 39 for E102 is going to be IC.S, which means Ice Cap snowboarding, because that's the snowboarding section. Usually, though, it's pretty... Oh, I see. Yeah, you can see Emerald Coast.ec.b, which is going to come up soon. So I just replayed Twinkle Park, and then I did what I called in the document ec.b for Emerald Coast Big, because Big has his own act, which in memory is Act 3. But sometimes I don't refer to them by their number because it's more convenient to think of them as just that character-specific level, because Act 3 kind of connotes this idea that like Sonic is going to go to Act 3 of Emerald Coast, which doesn't happen. It's exclusive to Big, and Big doesn't go to Act 1 or 2. It's like they're kind of two totally different areas, not in conversation with each other. I love not having standard notation. I love it not having a standardized notation. So here you can kind of peer through because the door hasn't loaded yet. You can see when I was walking into that room, you can kind of peer down that door and see the rest of the hallway. And that's because this is Hot Shelter Act 1, and in Hot Shelter Act 1, normally like Amy will go through this room and then she'll continue down that hallway. But because this is Big's asset portfolio, there are no assets in that hallway, and that door on the other side of the room never opens because all of the focus is just in this section where we'll be fishing. I'll try not to attract the attention of that fish. We really don't need to attract the attention of any fish in this game. The only one we need is Froggy. I can't think of any speedruns. I guess like 100% speedrun you're going to need to grab other fish because of the missions, but I can't think of any instance in this game where I fish anything other than Froggy. And currently he's giving me a hard time. Something fun about the water in this game is that generally the water is pretty standard. Like, they kind of developed water as a system, and then it's universal across the game. So, for instance, Big's flotation belt will work as well on his water here as it will work in the Lost World stage, which he has never intended to complete. He can fish in that water as well, in the Lost World water. So he could fish in that, like, canyon area. Sadly, no fish spawn. Maybe if this game were made today and it were kind of a random occurrence, then he might prompt fish to spawn rather than the fact that they're tied to kind of his assets here. I'm really flubbing this hot shelter, by the way. I'm wasting minutes here. This should not be taking nearly so long. But because that water is standard, there are fun interactions, like when Big loads into Casinopolis, where he's obviously not intended to be. You can cast your fishing line into the fountain in the casino lobby. And I just love finding stuff like that. That's what brings me so much joy about this game. Is that there's all these unintended interactions and all these ways that you can explore the game that were never intended. And it's kind of a running theme of games that I enjoy, that each of them have these discrete areas with their own personalities. So in this game, it's the stages. For instance, this is kind of going to be a wild connection, but I also really like Dark Souls 2. And in Dark Souls 2, there are these areas connected to the bonfires that are each kind of have their own identity. And the areas kind of are like the stages, and then the segments connected to a given bonfire are like the acts. Similar structure. But I kind of like that there's a difficulty imposed by, or that there's kind of this restriction imposed by the software of the time, which kind of prompted you loading different... not really sure where I'm going with this. Oh, I guess I'm completing Hot Shelter. Okay. I don't know why this is happening, actually. Oh, I think maybe I made a mistake. I reset when I shouldn't have. I was supposed to play through. This might have been my screw up. It looks like I have to do it a second time anyway. Well, that's embarrassing. Right, my mistake. Well, at least we'll do it now. Gives me some more time to talk about this. I like that these games, earlier games, had these discrete loading areas, and a discrete loading area, whether they, intended it or not, or whatever, kind of led to a game development philosophy of giving these areas distinct personalities. That they will use different asset portfolios, that they will use different, like they have different vibes. And that's something that I think has kind of gradually been lost with the advent of open world games. Like, open world games favor a kind of a more universal, ongoing feeling. But I like that older games had these separate loading areas and had their own feelings. That each had their own vibes. So we're going to wrap up with Big here. We're going to say a not-so-sorry farewell to the big fat purple cat. And then we're going to move on to Tails, finally. Because as I've spoken earlier, as I explained earlier, Tails... had to be completed after these guys. Yeah, it was stupid of me to reset earlier. I really don't know why I did that. I have to wait for this stage to be registered as having been completed because I'm going to be accessing some of Big's stages later from his Trials menu, if memory serves. Alright, so we're jumping in with Tails. So Tails' first task is going to be to set trap 1 with a sequence break. I would like to clip out and go into Emerald Coast, and I can talk about that. So there's kind of an idea that I could clip out and go into Emerald Coast right now with Tails, but and Tails would be able to play through the first level, and then when he got to this, he would be able to play through the first act of Emerald Coast. And then when he gets to the second act of Emerald Coast, Tails has a unique interaction where he immediately triggers a fade out when he gets to Act 2 that kicks him back out of the stage. And for a long time, I didn't regard that as a stage completion. I thought that was more of a stage failure or something. But it turns out that the game sees that as a game completion, as a stage completion. Because when you load up the file again, if you reset the console and you look at the file, it says the last stage completed was Emerald Coast by Tails, which means that the game regards it as completion. So following this, I don't know, it's a bit of a split standard, but following this run, I ended up kind of incorporating into a possible future route that Emerald Coast completion. So right here, I real quick dipped out and I'm completing Speed Highway, which is stage 5, to later set up Trapped Variant 5. And this is a fun little trick. I did a quick clip. I did 2 quick clips. And again, walls in this game are kind of a suggestion. If you work really hard, you will find a clip. I clipped out to complete stage 5 of Speed Highway here with Tails. And you might think, oh, he's setting up Trap Variant 2, and you'd be right. Only that this completing stage 5 alone, again, only prompts the game to display 5 slots in the Trials menu. It does not, as completing the first stage does, tell the game to list any levels, and it does not open the menu as completing the second stage does. So right now we're only giving the game the instruction, open 5 slots in Tails' Trials menu. But now we're going to complete Casinopolis, which is Tails' second stage. And I don't remember how I do this clip. Oh yeah, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to walk. It's really interesting, actually. You can just walk slightly outside of the casino, or of the hotel, and then just fly up and over all the geometry. Very straightforward. I missed the loading trigger, so I got to do it again. But you can, and I missed the loading trigger again, and I just died. Wow, great. By completing Tails' second stage now, we're going to open his Trials menu. I'm really struggling with this clip. Wow, this does not, yeah, there we go. I'm switching to free camera. Now I can actually see what I'm doing. Watch this. See? Now I actually know where I am. That's why I usually prefer free camera when I can. But restarting the game sets it to auto camera by default, so I end up forgetting, and then I kind of have to suffer through auto camera for a while until I remember to change it.
Come on, Tails.
Okay, we're loading into Tails Casinopolis here, and he loads into Act 2 by default. We've already seen this gutter stage, but Tails does not. Tails has a truncated version of Casinopolis, as he does with most of Sonic's stages, where he only has to complete Act 2. There is a clip in this room where you can kind of walk through a wall and then fly directly to the end, but it's kind of finicky, and I've never really bothered to research it because it's fast enough to just fly right through the level. Another indicator of my laziness kind of getting in the way to me being any kind of a good speedrunner. I'm more of an explorer. So, as we kind of work our way through this, what was I talking about? Oh, right. Okay, so we are setting up Trap Variant 1 secretly. So even though we've completed the 5th stage, Tails' 5th stage first, we're now going to complete his second stage, and that is going to set his his Trials menu to be in Trapped 1. So we'll exit, and we're going to select E102's Final Egg, because it is the shortest version of Final Egg. So, as in the case of Skydeck, you can load an unintended character into Sonic's version of a stage, for instance, but Sonic usually has the longest version of the stage. In order to save time, we're just going to load into Act 3 through E102. Again, with this one, I could probably pretty easily sit down and study where I'm supposed to go, and then just use those inputs like, oh, just fly up and to the left for 5 seconds and you're good. I end up doing this kind of gradual descent. And now we've completed Final Egg with Tails, so that one goes onto our list. There are certain instances, and I was kind of doing this throughout with Big, there are certain instances where I reset the game rather than let the game register the stage as completed, because sometimes when you let the game register the stage as completed, it screws up one of the glitches. So in Big's case, playing through and completing a stage loaded in through quick glitch can sometimes change your drop address, which will foil the quick glitch. Right there, I just did a quick soft lock escape. So if you remember earlier, I was talking about how I originally called all of this trapped because Tails was trapped in that casino area. Normally, all the doors are shut to him. But there's 2 ways that you can get out, and that's one that I found, which is you can kind of run up that invisible wall to get some altitude and get out of there. The more common way of doing it is just doing kind of like a pretty optimal speed conservation on the train steps to fly up. There is a way to one-cycle Egg Hornet with Tails, but I don't know how to do it. You kind of need to get Eggman to like jump in a specific, he needs to like dive in a specific place, and then you like tail whip him over and over. With Sonic, it's easy because the homing attack allows him to quickly get back to Eggman. But because Tails' tail whip kind of kicks him away, like kicks him back, you can't quickly re-damage the Egg Hornet to skip its next cycle. So we're going to have to sit through these cycles. Not too bad. You'll notice also that while the quick glitch does affect your adventure mode location, the trap glitch does not. So the trap glitch, you can kind of keep manipulating your trials menu with Indemnity, and it's not going to affect the state, the adventure mode, except in the instances where setting up the trap glitch itself soft locks you because you have done a sequence break, as we will see with Knuckles on File 2 coming up eventually, someday far in the future, another couple hours out. So here we're going to grab the Windy Key, and this is going to let us, this is one of the 2 stages, Windy Valley and Ice Cap, which involve you picking up one of these keys and bringing them to a pedestal to unlock the stage. In both instances, the loading zone, well actually sorry, in Windy Valley's instance, in the instance of Windy Valley, the loading zone to Windy Valley does not spawn until you put that stone in the pedestal. So there's no way to kind of clip into the loading valley, or Windy Valley loading zone. With Ice Cap, the loading zone is available to characters that are intended to go there. So the loading zone is included in the Adventure Hub asset portfolio of characters intended to go to Ice Cap. That loading zone is behind the Ice Cap door, which opens with the pedestal, which means you can clip past the Ice Cap door in order to get access to the Ice Cap loading zone. The only problem is that it's pretty hard to clip back out of the Ice Cap cave. You have way fewer tools. The geometry is less forgiving. The only one who can really do it easily is Tails, because Tails can kind of just fly through the roof. I don't think that we're going to see that. That is another kind of very old-fashioned, well-known about glitch of just flying through the roof of the Ice Cap cave. Alright, so here, blink and you'll miss it. That was the Trap 2 glitch. So you saw I went over to Knuckles' stages, and I loaded in Tails's. I loaded in his 4th and 5th stage into Tails' registry. So real quick, I did a sneaky thing. I used Trap Variant 1 in order to play Final Egg with Tails, because that's the only way you can get Final Egg with Tails easily. And then I went over and completed Tails' 1st stage in the Adventure Hub, which then meets the condition of having his 1st, 2nd, and 5th stages completed, which activates Trap Variant 2. We're seeing right now a fun little interaction with the way Tails' flight pattern kind of matches. I think I might die here. No, we're good, we're good. His flight kind of interacts with that geometry. It's fun. So then I completed Tails' 1st stage, Windy Valley, which then set 1, 2, and 5, which means that stages would be listed in the Trials menu and Trap Variant 2 was activated, which then meant that slots 4 and 5 opened so that I could go over to Knuckles' menu, select his character, and then load in his 4th and 5th stage, which includes his 4th stage, Lost World, which we are now completing. So we are completing Lost World with Tails. Very fun. Then we are going to load in Sky Deck also through here. So is this really going to work? I think this might not work. I might be stupid. No. No, yeah, this doesn't work. Okay, so great. Actually, you get to see it in this run. I made the mistake of loading in this stage, and you can see all the assets except for like a couple are missing. So actually, it does populate a couple assets back there. It does give you the little flyers over there. That's fun. So it looks like they kind of started designing this area for Tails, and then they gave up. And they were like, we're not going to do that. So silly me. We are going to load in Sonic's Sky Deck trial. I don't know what I'm doing here. I didn't. Okay, all right. We're just loading in. Okay, so we're actually just loading in Sky Deck off of Tails' own menu, which is fine. So yeah, you can see that my brain was not fully working when I was first recording this. I made a number of mistakes that I would have, learned from and phased out if I had done more runs after this. But this ended up being the only one I really did, just because it kind of proved the point that I was looking to prove. I could probably do another run, and I could include some of the updated features. Like, for instance, Tails has that unique interaction in Emerald Coast where he technically completes the stage. The fade out is technically him completing the stage, and that happens again with when he plays Red Mountain, because in both Emerald Coast and Red Mountain, when he loads into the stage, when he loads into the act of the stage where he appears as like an NPC, he appears in a cutscene for Sonic. When that happens, I think it just automatically triggers the fade out. I don't know why. But that's my speculation.
Come on, Tails.
So here we're jumping into Ice Cap, and this is Ice Cap Act 3, which we did not see earlier because we kind of skipped it by clipping through the wall with Sonic. I call it Ice Cap Snowboard because it is technically Act 3. It is distinct from Act 1, even though it reuses a lot of the early stage layout of Act 1. But Act 1 is essentially this snowboard layout. It's this upper section. It's like the upper tract of this snowboard trail. Only there's a death plane covering the entire bottom half of the map, so you can't get down to this area where we're at, for instance. And that's why I kind of call it IceCap.S rather than Ice Cap Act 3, because it's distinct. And yeah, we're going to keep moving through here. I suppose now is as good a time as any to start talking about the hidden fourth variant of glitches. So we've talked about entrance glitches, which is, these are glitches relevant to getting yourself into an unintended stage. We've talked about entrance glitches, which is about manipulating collision to get access to the loading zones in the adventure field. We talked about trap glitches, which is about manipulating the trials menu to load in stages over the null byte 00 to load in garbage data and then use that. We've talked about the quit glitch, which is manipulating the game's drop table when you complete an unintended stage in the adventure mode. Now we're going to talk about the fourth glitch, which admittedly I think might have been found earlier than quit glitch. I don't exactly remember my history, but it was found decently earlier. It wasn't an earth-shattering revelation when it was found. And this is something called the 256 glitch. So 256 is a magical number in game development. I believe it is 2 to the 6th. I could be wrong. It might be 2 to the 6th, 2 to the 8th, whatever. It's some power of 2. And what it is it is the maximum possible value that, or I should say, yeah, it's the maximum possible value that a hexadecimal byte can contain. So a hexadecimal byte is a pair of two numbers in hexadecimal. So that's 0 through 9 and then A through F, which means that there are 16 numbers. And the 16 distinct digits, basically, where A through F are treated as digits. So, for instance, the number 10, rather than being rendered as 10, will be rendered as 0A, because you just keep counting. You go 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, and then it loops back around, and then you'll have 10. So if you're looking at hexadecimal format, 10 isn't actually 10 as it would be with traditional numbers. It's secretly, I don't know, 16 or something. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, maybe 17. So why is this relevant? The idea is that the maximum value of 2 digits in decimal is 99. It's 99. That's the maximum value you can get up to. But in hexadecimal, you can get up to FF. And FF is big because FF is the value 255. It's the value 255. Now, so you have 255, and then if you take 00 as your starting point, if you call 00, if you say, okay, 00 means 1, or it's like value 1, then you have 256 unique values that you can form with a hexadecimal byte. It turns out that the way that Sonic Adventure DX tracks whether or not you have completed a stage, so, has Tails completed Windy Valley? If you haven't done it yet, it's 0. After you complete Windy Valley, it's 1. But for whatever reason, the game tracks this not with a binary, like a simple flip with a condition. It tracks it with a byte. So that means that if you complete Windy Valley a second time, the game knows that you've completed Windy Valley twice. And then it knows you've completed it 3 times and 4 times. And as Tails, you can keep completing Windy Valley over and over and over and over. And it'll steadily increment this byte, which tracks how many times Tails has completed Windy Valley. And you can get this byte all the way up to 255, so you can complete the stage 255 times. And when you completed it 255 times, it will sit at value FF. So it will have gone from 00, which is never having completed it, to FF, which is completing it 255 times. And now what happens is that when you complete it an additional time, the game knows to increment your number of completions of Windy Valley by 1. So it adds 1. And then what that does is it rolls over. So this is called an integer rollover. This is called an integer overflow, because you have put you have incremented this byte too many times, and it goes from 255 to 00. So what you've done is you've now tricked the game by completing the Windy Valley stage 256 times. You have caused the game to believe that you've completed it 0 times. And this is big because not the cat, but this is big. This is important because if you recall, the trapped glitches specifically concern themselves with whether or not you have completed a stage or not, right? Remember, the triggers are: have you completed your first stage? If so, list the levels. Have you completed your second stage? If so, grant access to the menu. Have you completed your 5th stage? If so, open up 5 slots. So by completing the null, by underflowing or overflowing or whatever, by rolling it over to 00, you can make a game basically have amnesia over whether or not you have completed a level. Which means that now it's possible for Sonic to do Trap Variant 1, for instance, because he can complete Emerald Coast 256 times. So let's say Sonic completes Emerald Coast and then he completes Windy Valley. So he's done his first and second stage. Okay, so the game knows to list your levels and it knows to give you access to the character menu. Now you can go back with Sonic and you can complete Emerald Coast 255 additional times. And when you do that, the game will eventually, after it ticks over, it will forget you ever completed Emerald Coast once. And then the menu will open up and it'll be in the state of a Trap Variant 1 menu because it won't know to list the levels. So this 256 glitch is the kind of the hidden dark, black sheep of kind of the glitches, because while it is cool and it does offer you flexibility, it's a kind of a brute force thing that takes so much time because you have to complete a stage 255 times. And if a stage takes you, even if it takes you, a forgiving minute and a half to finish, that's still going to be a minute and a half times 250. So that's going to be 250 minutes minimum plus an additional half a minute. So it's going to be 375 minutes. So that's hours. That's hours and hours and hours. And I would rather not spend 5 hours playing the same level over and over and over. Very fortunately for us, there is only one stage that can be completed that you can get access to only through the 256 glitch, or the 256 glitch. And that is Knuckles completing Ice Cap. So the theoretical limit is of stages that you can complete with many different characters, with all these different characters, is 53. And then, if you include Knuckles completing Ice Cap, which I do not do in this run because it would require me completing a stage 256 times. I don't remember exactly which stage I need to complete because it is a little specific. But by completing a certain stage 256 times, you do eventually get access to Ice Cap for Knuckles when he's a Trapped 1 character. So this would be by sequence breaking a source character. I believe it's Sonic. I believe I have to sequence break Sonic by completing Casinopolis or something 256 times, and that gives him access. That makes Ice Cap possible for Knuckles. And that is just kind of, I could be totally wrong about that. I just know I did do it with some character, so I ended up opting not to do it for the speed run because that would tack on literally 4 hours to this speed run to get one stage done. And even after 2 hours and 15 minutes, I'm getting a little tired of talking, and I don't think I would be able to fill the time of 4 hours of completing the same stage. As I've been yapping about all this, we've been watching E102 pick up some additional stages through the quit stages. Oh, and something very big happened that I probably should have mentioned. So E102, oh gosh, I really got to get into this. Oh, we talked earlier about spawning coordinates. And remember, when the character is not intended to go to a stage, its spawning coordinates default to 0, 0, 0. There's something more here, which is that when you go directly from there are certain, okay, let's just put it this way. There are certain circumstances where you can overwrite those null bytes. So remember, the spawning coordinates are 0, 0, 0, which means they're all null bytes. Or they're all null data, I should say. I can load specific spawning coordinates over those stages. And the way that you do that is that you set up the quick glitch, and then if you perform the quick glitch, you can load in specific coordinates. I'll come back to spawning. It's called spawning displacement. I'll come back to that in a second. But first, I'm going to talk about look at how messed up Twinkle Park is as E102. You've got like kind of the floor moves out from under you here. Everything is red. There's no there. I don't believe there's any audio. I believe the track doesn't play. I call this Blood Castle because of this totally insane red mist that just kind of settles over everything. And this was an absolute joy to discover. What was not a joy to discover was the the kind of issue. I also just fell here and lost a ton of time. What was not a joy to discover was the fact that this stage will eventually crash if you don't frequently reload. There's some kind of a memory leak. E102 in Twinkle Park causes a memory leak, so if you don't constantly refresh by restarting, then the memory leak will eventually cause the game to crash, which just wastes a bunch of time. So spawning displacement. Let me see if I can remember this, because it was honestly pretty complex even for me to learn. I think it's that by default, when you complete the quit glitch, the drop address is 00, because Casinopolis drops you to 00. But if you complete Casinopolis a second time, or if you complete certain stages a second time, the game has two drop tables. I alluded to this earlier. It has a drop table A, which is where it places you in the adventure mode after you have just completed a stage for the first time. And then it has a drop table B, where it places you after you've completed a stage in adventure mode and you've already completed that stage before. And it's relevant and important that it has these two different drop tables, because there are certain circumstances where they need to be different. For instance, when Sonic completes Skydeck on Egg Carrier for the first time, he gets placed into the Egg Carrier interior. But that is not really like what's the word? That doesn't really. It's a little counterintuitive. If you play through later, if you go back as Sonic in Egg Carrier, if you go to the Egg Carrier Sonic later after you finished his adventure, or after you finish that section of his adventure, and you say, "I want to play Skydeck again," when you play Skydeck a second time, it doesn't make sense for it to drop you into the Egg Carrier interior. So it drops you in the Egg Carrier exterior, which means there are two different drop addresses where the game consults two different drop tables. This is a really weird little clip, kind of a down warp to get out of that tunnel. The two different drop addresses are really relevant. Now, on PS3, the first drop address for completing Casinopolis with an unintended character, the first drop address is 00, the null byte. The second drop address is Final Egg, Act 1. Now, E102 does have specific spawning coordinates for Final Egg, the stage Final Egg. He has these because he's intended to play Final Egg. He does not ever go to Final Egg Act 1, but nonetheless, he has specific spawning coordinates to go to that go with that level, that go with that stage. So let's say his spawning coordinates are, 10, 40, 50, right? So that would be his X, his Y, and his Z coordinates. Now with spawning displacement, if I've set up the quick glitch, And the quick glitch does apply. The quick glitch applies whenever your drop address for the adventure mode is an action stage, because of the way the action stage and adventure hubs interact. So you can quit from the 0-0 you can quit from the 0-0 action stage, Hedgehog Hammer, and cause the quick glitch, just as easily as you can quit from Final Egg Act 1 and cause the quick glitch. The difference between them is that while no character, except maybe Amy, I think, but really no character, while no character has specific spawning coordinates for the test room for the Hedgehog Hammer 0-0 null byte room, nobody has coordinates there, so they all default to 0-0. Amy might actually specifically have coordinates, but they're also 0-0-0. Because no character has spawning coordinates there, I never noticed this until I ended up setting this glitch up again with Final Egg. So when you complete Final Egg, when you complete Casinopolis a second time with an unintended character, for instance E102, and it puts you in Final Egg, E102's spawn coordinates for Final Egg will now carry over to whatever action stage you quit into. So if you're having trouble following, I don't blame you, but basically, I can use E102's Final Egg coordinates to spawning displace into the level of into a stage that otherwise I would not have been able to complete. So we'll see this very shortly. Fortunately, I got this first try. Very nice. I'm about to clip back into Casinopolis for a second time today. And I will use those 400 rings I just gathered again to complete it a second time, which will then, the game doesn't know where to drop me. It consults drop table B. So earlier it consulted drop table A and put me in the null byte 0-0. Now it's going to consult drop table B and put me into Final Egg. And then using Final Egg, I can quit from Final Egg to cause spawning displacement, where then I will be able to complete Speed Highway Act 3. So a little bit about Speed Highway. A well-known, here I am dropping in a Final Egg in Act 1, and I'm going to reset because the game has processed them there. A little thing about Speed Highway. Speed Highway is the source of a well-known glitch for the original Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure DX releases. So in the original Dreamcast release, when you're playing with Tails, if memory serves, Tails plays Speed Highway Act 1, and he only plays Speed Highway Act 1. His start and finish is supposed to be within Speed Highway Act 1. Whereas Sonic deviates and takes a rocket up to an adjacent building and triggers a loading zone to go into Act 2 on his playthrough. So here I'm selecting Speed Highway, by the way, to load in as E102. Remember, Quick Glitch takes you to the selected level. So Sonic goes on to a different course, whereas Tails continues to play through Speed Highway Act 1 normally. Now, there is a glitch, which is, here's the spawning displacement. Now I'm up here on top of the roof. Very cool. Now, there is a well-known glitch, which in the original Sonic Adventure involved flying off course as Tails, and you could fly over to the loading zone to Act 2 for Speed Highway, and you could trigger it, and you could go into Act 2 on Speed Highway, normally Sonic's Act 2. And this was fun and good, and everybody enjoyed it. So that naturally meant that the developers had to remove it, or had to stop people from having so much fun. So what they did instead was, they put a giant billboard on the DX release. They put a giant billboard in front of the Act 2 trigger area. So similarly to their philosophy with Station Square, although this might have been a different set of devs doing the port onto DX, they introduced a big obstacle to keep you from getting to Speed Highway Act 2. However, you can actually clip through / around that as Tails on the GameCube release. You can still clip through that billboard and get into the Act 2 loading trigger and still continue on through Act 2 and then Act 3 as Tails in Speed Highway. So finally, for the PC port, they went in and they removed the loading zone altogether. So they actually added it a specific condition, which is if you are any character other than Sonic. So if you show up to Speed Highway with a pass that is not Sonic's, that's how they coded it, then the Act 2 trigger will not load. So whereas on Nintendo GameCube on Nintendo GameCube, it was no problem to load characters into Sonic's Speed Highway and then work their way naturally over through to Act 2 and Act 3. So, for instance, E102 could go to Speed Highway Act 2. That's no longer possible from PC onward, so PC, PS3, Xbox, because of this specific condition that they coded in that the Act 2 trigger will not load unless you are Sonic, which means that we're no longer able to complete Speed Highway by starting from Sonic's starting point. We can only complete it by starting from Knuckles' starting point, which is Act 3. Which is, again, Act 3 at dawn. This is a problem because Knuckles Speed Highway Act 3 at dawn, the coordinates 0, 0, 0 drop you inside of a wall, and normally for every character, there is a fade-in time. So like as the level is starting, there's a fade-in where you can't control your character until the fade-in has finished. And the fade-in, spawning into Speed Highway Act 3 as an unintended character, the fade-in would take so long, and you were already so close to a death barrier that you would die before you ever gained control of your character. So what I ended up doing is I kind of basically had to figure out this whole thing with spawning displacement so that I would be able to load Speed Highway Act 3 at dawn for an unintended character, namely E102. And the spawning displacement allows me to drop inside of the level rather than outside of the level in the wall over a death plane. So that was a huge kind of a landmark thing. But it does mean that there's a difference, which is that on GameCube version, Amy and possibly Big, I don't know, mainly Amy, using like the 256 glitch, is able to load in Speed Highway Act 1 and complete it normally from Sonic's point of view without an issue. But because after GameCube they added in this patch that the loading zone to Act 2 doesn't load if you are not Sonic, it's no longer possible. So Amy can complete Speed Highway on the GameCube, but not on PS3. I believe. We're gonna see later. Admittedly, like this is a fun thing. I'm gonna get forced into the wall. Admittedly, this run was still sort of a learning process, and that's why things happened like where I loaded into Speed Highway Act 3 and it was missing assets for Tails because they created an incomplete asset portfolio for Tails on Speed Highway Act 3. I was still sort of figuring things out, and I would continue to figure things out after this as I planned future runs and then didn't do them. But this one, you will see, it looks like I see on my little itinerary down there, I see on my list, that I am supposed to go to Speed Highway as Amy, and we're going to see if the spawning displacement actually works. Because spawning displacement, as I was still finding out at the time, is possible only when the stage you are quitting from using the quit glitch has coordinates for you that you can then use to overwrite whatever you're loading into. So, for instance, when I'm quitting from Hedgehog Hammer as any character, it's always 0, 0, 0, so there's no spawning displacement. When I'm quitting from Final Egg as E102, E102 does have Final Egg coordinates, which then get copied over into whatever I'm quitting into. So, for instance, Speed Highway, I copy over that 10, 40, 50 into Speed Highway, and then I'm able to exist within the bounds of Speed Highway. So now we're going to load up Amy. And this is kind of a victory lap, I guess. Like I really enjoy playing Amy. I think her controls are really like they're kind of difficult to master, but they're like enjoyable. Like she's a little slow, but she does have like some stuff that you can use to kind of get around, and I do find it fun. So I am going to be doing. I mean, probably speedrunners would be upset. Here's another Cream cameo, by the way. Speedrunners probably be upset that I'm doing so many hammer jumps. Hammer jumps are not optimal. Technically, the most optimal thing is just jumping. I think just a regular jump. But I like using hammer jumps to get around. Here we're going to do one of the craziest, clips. So originally, like, I can't even remember, but I think it involved like using the Hamburger Man, the statue, and all this other stuff. But eventually, someone, and I wish I could cite who. I don't know off the top of my head. Just developed this simple hammer jump to clip right out of the stage and into. Or clip right out of the adventure hub and into the level. Amy has no such qualms actually interacting with the pinball menu or the pinball table, as we saw with Big earlier. It's just E102 who can't use the pinball systems, who will freeze the game. So E102 has to do that whole thing with loading up on rings before you come in. So here we're going to gather our rings, kind of a bit of a slow process. Something fun is that if you load up Casinopolis, and I think we're going to see it later, if you load up Casinopolis as Amy with the Warrior Feather and you put her into her wind-up, so with the Warrior Feather when you hold B, it's an upgrade for Amy where you hold B, you can spin using her hammer. That causes her to have the physics of a pinball, like she can slide around, which is a lot of fun. The same thing happens when Big is in his wind-up with a fishing rod, which I don't think we saw earlier, but when Big winds up with his fishing rod on this pinball table, then he can also skate around like a pinball. Very fun. Yeah, I just really like. I feel like Amy's movement is very elegant if you know how to do it. It's a lot of fun to kind of see her flipping around. So we're going to complete Casinopolis with Amy here, and this is the first time we've actually finally gotten to Amy. So Amy is the last character we ever end up interacting with. Shake out all her rings, and again, Amy has no issues getting up onto the terminal, as Big did. So we can land on the terminal or the capsule and finish this level. And we are going to set up the quit glitch with this because we're finishing Casinopolis. So here we go to Hedgehog Hammer. But I'm resetting here. Or maybe not. Actually, yeah, okay, now we're resetting. I think the game might have crashed there. And then I had to manually kind of restart the emulator. I think as we're moving into this last kind of segment of the run, we can talk a bit about maybe the future of this run. I mean, it's kind of funny to talk about when I haven't actually tried it in so many years, but I know that in a future run of this, I would include Tails in Emerald Coast and Tails in Red Mountain, because both of those are technically considered by the game to be completions. The only thing is that I'm kind of fudging the rules because my rules for this run were I needed to see a timer stop, and you do not see a timer stop with either of those. I kind of get selective about this because, as I said, there are certain instances where allowing the game to load or allowing the game to save when you've completed a level can fry your save file, and that would mean that I would end up needing to recreate. You remember the first kind of 50 minutes of drudgery in this run was me unlocking all of these characters to play, and I would need to be doing that over and over, and that's just not fun. So in order to facilitate the fun of the run, I've made it so that the timer just has to stop. I don't actually have to let the game save and log the fact that I've completed the level. But I could probably just introduce some condition like, oh, it's an either or. Like either the game is the stage is considered finished either when the timer stops or the game acknowledges it as having been finished, as in the case of Tails. So that could add two more stages for Tails. It also would say, oh, here's this one thing. All right, so for the most part, Amy's been able to play through this level fine, but this is one spot where things are a little different because the way that she interacts with springs is different. For some reason, Amy gets way more height off of springs than other characters, and as a result, she like shoots past her connection here. She's supposed to hit kind of 2 springs in sequence, but she ends up hitting the first spring, and it rockets her off with so much force that she misses the second spring, and then you kind of have to do a little bit of finagling to get her back onto the course in the next part of Windy Valley Act 3, which is where we are here. This is Windy Valley Act 3. So the first act is what we saw with E102. The second act is the tornado, and this is the third act, which is called In the Air, if memory serves. And this is one instance where I do want to use auto camera because it is pretty consistent as far as getting Amy back onto the course. I just kind of need to redirect, and then we manage to land back on here. Again, just barely. Another instance where it kind of feels like, almost like it was intended. Of course, it's insane to say that. But yeah, this was always so this would have been pure joy to me as a kid, seeing Amy finish the stage. Which is really the only reason why I bother to do all this stuff as an adult, is just to kind of get that sense of gratification that I set for myself then. I apologize for my stupidity making you all sick, rotating this camera around. We're kind of gently float our way down to the final island here. Windy Valley is also one of my favorite areas in any Sonic game. I love the music. I love the kind of the aesthetic, very lightheartedness of it. So we'll quit out of Windy Valley because Windy Valley actually has a stable drop address because it was one of the first stages modeled, if you'll remember when I talked about that. Which means that if I were to allow the game to save after I have completed Windy Valley with Amy, it would drop her at its stable drop address in the Mystic Ruins. And because Amy hasn't actually finished any of her intended stages to this point,
Selecting
that would mean that I would be soft locked because I would be trapped in the Mystic Ruins area. And then the other bit, as far as the future of this run, or as far as the future of this route and routing, would be that I could have that 256 interaction where I could get Knuckles into Ice Cap, but it would be very painful and unfun. Some other things to talk about. We can talk about trap glitches. The way that the trap glitch interacts with the quit glitch, it is possible to use the quit glitch to set up the trap glitch for characters where it otherwise would not have been possible. If you remember, I talked earlier a bit at length about how the trap glitch was not available to Amy or Big or Sonic, but specifically in this context to be Amy and Big, because Amy and Big are not able to get to, well, in the case of, in either case, they're not able to get to their second stage without completing their first stage, because Big has to complete Twinkle Park in order for the train to spawn so that he can get to his second stage, which is Ice Cap. And Amy needs to complete Twinkle Park in order to get abducted and sent to the egg carrier, and in the egg carrier is where she finishes her second stage, Hot Shelter. So Amy can't get to Hot Shelter, Big can't get to Ice Cap without finishing their first stages first, so Trapped seems off the table for them. Trapped Variant 1. Trapped Variant 2 is necessarily off the table for Amy because she only has 3 stages, so completing her first, second, and final stage actually just fully unlocks her Trials menu, and there are no blank slots where you can slot in other character stages. Big, unlike Knuckles and Tails and E102, Big only has 4 stages rather than 5. So even though you can set up Trapped Variant 2 with Big, and, well, okay, you still can't because of, you cannot go from his first and second stage to his 4th stage, because Big can't get from Ice Cap to Hot Shelter except by completing Emerald Coast as 3rd stage. So Big also can't complete Trapped Variant 2. But even if he could, by default, it wouldn't help you as much as in other characters because he only has his 4th slot free, so he could only load in characters' 4th slot stage. There could be some manipulation around that. You could do some sequence breaking with Tails and E102, for instance, which will let you kind of load a little bit more customary, like you can kind of customize a bit what appears in the 4th slot, but it's still a little bit more restrictive. And generally, the difference is if you use the quick glitch, if you have Amy perform the quick glitch, Amy can go directly from where she starts to completing Casinopolis, opening the quick glitch, and then loading in and completing Hot Shelter. So by doing this, Amy can load in, and we'll eventually do this actually in the course of this route. That technically sets up Trap Variant 1 for Amy, because now she's completed only her second stage, so the Trials menu says, okay, open the Trials menu, but there will be nothing there, which means that you can load in whatever you want. But naturally, this is a much more restrictive form of doing things versus the quick glitch, because the quick glitch is so open, it's so strong. You can select any level you want in the Trials menu, and then just, load into the character's adventure and then pause and quit, and boom, they're there. With the trap glitch, there's all these other, kind of roadblocks. So the trap glitch, because it's generally weaker than the quick glitch, it typically doesn't make sense to use the quick glitch as a means of an end to set up trap. But it's still funny that you can do it. The only difference, the only certain rare circumstances where it might feasibly be necessary or wanted, is that, as I spoke earlier when we were with Tails, completing stages through the Trials menu generally doesn't have very much of an impact on the game. Like, there's no way to soft lock yourself by completing an unintended stage through the Trials menu. But there is a way to soft lock yourself by completing an unintended stage through the quick glitch, because the quick glitch will reference the drop table, and if the drop table is a bunk address, as it is in the event of, say, Skydeck will drop you in, it'll like fry your file, so then you won't be able to access that character because they will drop to a crash location. So there's that worth talking about. What else did I want to talk about? I wanted to talk about, I could talk about this. I can talk about the fact that in the drop tables, so drop tables, because we're just pouring it on now. there are two drop tables. There's drop table A and drop table B. Drop table A is for the first completion, drop table B is for the second completion in adventure mode. And there's a theoretical drop table C, which I haven't explored very much, where drop table C is a universal standard drop point for every character, which is accessed after having finished, or after having 100%ed their adventure, or in mission mode in Adventure DX, which is kind of a specialized adventure mode. This is fascinating. Okay. So I did this mostly because it's fun to watch. Also might have been a mistake, but you can kind of see how Amy actually gets to walk around and interact with the pinball menu, with the pinball level here, which is, again, would have been pure joy to me as a kid. So there's these three different drop tables, theoretically, A, B, and C. A and B are the only ones that are usually ever relevant. But wouldn't you believe it, these drop tables, because the way that we interact with them in the context of this run is largely predicated on sending garbage in and garbage out, they're actually linked to the version of the game that we're playing. That is the port of the game. So, in another way, and put another way, the GCN, the GameCube version, has a different drop table A, B, and C than the PC version, which has a different drop table A, B, and C than the PS3 version. So only on the PS3 version is it possible to load into the null room after completing Casinopolis with an unintended character, as we're about to witness right now. This is only possible in the PS3 version. However, on the GameCube version, the drop table A, the address for completing Casinopolis with an unintended character, the drop table A address is, again, that Chaos 0 Act 16 bunk address that crashes your file. The drop table B address is Emerald Coast Act 2. And this is big because, again, not the cat, this is big, this is huge, because this allows for the quit glitch on the GameCube. But the problem is, how do you get a character into quit glitch position on the GameCube? How do you make that happen if, in order to get, because you need to complete it the second time. Again, drop table B refers to completing the stage for a second time. So the Casinopolis quick glitch is possible because it drops you in Emerald Coast Act 2 on GameCube. It's possible, theoretically, if you can complete Casinopolis a first time, and then you complete Casinopolis a second time, because the second time is what will trigger the quick glitch. The only problem is that completing Casinopolis the first time irreversibly damages your game file, and then you can't make any progress. So there's kind of a bit of a game of surgery or operation of trying to figure out how can we get this character to complete Casinopolis in an unintended context before they complete it for the second time. So in other words, it can't be through the adventure mode because the adventure mode will put you into this crash drop address. So one way that you could theoretically do it on the routing is if you wanted to do this run on Nintendo GameCube, it's in a vacuum, it's possible. It's theoretically possible. If you, for instance, with Amy, if you select Amy, you play through her first stage, her second stage, then you perform the 256 glitch back on her first stage, so you undo having ever done her first stage, which activates Trap Variant 1. Now her menu is blank, and then you go to a sequence broken Sonic, and then you load in Casinopolis to the Trap 2 Amy. Then you can get into Casinopolis through Amy. You can complete it through her Trials menu. And again, this ticks the byte. So the byte will say, oh, Amy has done Casinopolis once. And then you can go into the adventure field, and then you can clip into Casinopolis with Amy, and you can complete it a second time with Amy safely. And it will drop you in, it will set your drop address to Emerald Coast Act 2. So that will activate Quick Glitch on GameCube Nintendo. So GameCube Nintendo, it is possible to do the Quick Glitch, even though I say it's exclusive to PS3. The only thing the PS3 saves you is 5 hours of grinding, completing the same level over and over. In this case, it would be Twinkle Park with Amy. And unless you know Castle Skip, which is this crazy, intricate, specific series of hammer jumps up the front of the castle, which mercifully will let you solve Twinkle Park in like 16 seconds. Unless you know how to do that, you have to play through the entirety of Twinkle Park 255 times, which will take 5 hours or 6 hours or something of just rote replaying the same level. And I've done it before, trust me. I don't want to do it in the context of a speed run, so that's why I do all this stuff on PS3 rather than on GameCube. And the worst thing is that because it's about whether the individual character has completed a given stage. Oh, this is fun. Okay, so I'll talk about what I'm doing here in a second as I wrap up what I just was talking about. Because you have to do it for individual characters, you have to complete Amy's first stage 256 times. You have to complete Big's first stage 256 times. And because Casinopolis only appears in the third slot for Sonic, it appears in the second slot for Knuckles and Tails in their Trials menu, you can never force it down into the fourth slot or the fifth slot to access it through Trap Variant 2, which is the only way that E102 could retrieve it in the Trials menu to safely complete it a first time before he completed it in the Adventure Field to get the second time to get access to the second drop address to then take him to the Quick Glitch. This is the coolest part of the run because I perform hammer jumps on extremely narrow pieces of geometry. Because even though this level should be super easy and I just parachute right down into the final egg area, I'm kind of a savage, and I just dropped into the middle of the stage and then I just ran the rest of it with Amy because I know how to do that. So what was I talking about? Right. Anyway, the GameCube Nintendo version of this run would take so much longer, even if it does allow for slightly more stage completion. But I don't really want to do it. Maybe someday when I have an entire 24 hours and a lot of caffeinated beverages lying around, I'll give it a shot. Where are we headed now? We just finished Final Egg. We're going to do Speed Highway, Act 3 with Amy, which is very pleasant. Again, me personally, I'm loving this. Just kind of a nice little romp through all of these stages, the atmospheric stages, which I do love. We'll be walking through at dawn. Right, so see, I completed Casinopolis a second time, and Amy does have specific spawn coordinates for Final Egg, which means that when I load in to Speed Highway, I spawn again in a wall, but I am able to successfully get into the confines of the map. I think I might have screwed up explaining that earlier, so I apologize. But essentially, I did the same thing again where Amy completed Casinopolis twice, and that made it possible because her second drop address is Final Egg. Then she can quit from Final Egg and carry over her spawn coordinates to cause spawning displacement for her to be able to load in Speed Highway Act 3. So it's really just Big that can't complete Speed Highway Act 3 because, regrettably, Big does not have specific spawn coordinates for Final Egg. I managed to die here. Very cool. Fortunately, we can load back in again. So the thing is, Casinopolis for the first time puts you at 0-0. The second time puts you at Final Egg Act 1 on PS3. And there are some other stages which do put you into weird... if you're asking, like, why Casinopolis? Why only Casinopolis? Can't you do it with other stages? The problem is mainly that the loading zones for these unintended stages don't exist for maps other than Station Square. Remember, Station Square is the only one where they pretty much blocked off the loading triggers to these stages with geometry that you can clip through. So, for instance, even though Tails or Big, both of them, can clip into the area of the map in Mystic Ruins, in the Mystic Jungle, where they would want to go to, like, Lost World, even though you can clip into those stages. Oh, I think I screwed up here. I think I let the game save. Okay, I let the game save here by mistake, and what that did is that actually froze this game file, and I'm remembering now. I end up having to take a long time to fix my mistake because I have to unlock Amy a second time and then play through Hot Shelter. So this is the danger of what can happen if you don't reset, if you're not diligent resetting your game. Completing Speed Highway for a second time froze my game there. So, where am I going with this? Right, so Casinopolis is immediately accessible for these characters, and it does drop to an address like that. It does drop to 0-0 to make Quick Glitch possible, which is awesome. But if you're looking at the other stages, so for instance, let's take Amy, right? So Amy can clip into Speed Highway, but she doesn't spawn within bounds, so she dies immediately, so she can't complete it to cause spawning displacement. And even if she could, or she can't complete it to cause the Quick Glitch, let alone spawning displacement. And even if she could, it ends up crashing the game, as we just saw. Where's another area? What else can she do? She can clip into Emerald Coast, but Emerald Coast she can't complete because Emerald Coast, when you complete Act 1 of Emerald Coast, you spawn way out of bounds in Act 2 on a spring. And the reason you spawn on a spring, because the spring is one asset you might find at 0-0 in certain stages, or a ring, is because a spring and a ring will usually occupy asset value 0-0. So sometimes the devs ended up leaving asset 0-0 at spawn coordinates 0-0-0. And in the case of Emerald Coast Act 2, there is a spring way out of bounds, which you can bounce on. So anyway, but that doesn't. But the point is that Amy can't reach the rest of the stage, starting in Emerald Coast Act 2. So that's out of bounds. And even if she could, I've seen on certain versions that completing Emerald Coast with an unintended character drops you in the past. It drops you in the past level, which we might have glimpsed at a couple times. So the past is treated as another adventure hub. That's the past version of Mystic Ruins, and that wouldn't help with the quick glitch, because that would be a adventure hub and not an action stage. So you would not be able to perform the quick glitch. So, what else does that leave us? We can't do Emerald Coast. We can't do Speed Highway, and those are accessible from Station Square. If I'm counting on my fingers here, we can do Casinopolis, and that works. So let's keep that one in mind. We can do Twinkle Park, but she has a stable drop address, so that's not activating the quick glitch. I think there might be another one here, but I can't remember it. So let's move on to Egg Carrier. So in Egg Carrier, she has Emerald Coast, which she can do, and she completes that normally, so that won't work. And Skydeck, and the loading zone for Skydeck is sadly not present because we're outside of Station Square, and the devs got wise and they stopped loading the loading zones for characters that weren't intended to go there. And the same thing for Mystic Ruins. So in Mystic Ruins, she can't get into Windy Valley, she can't get into Ice Cap, she can't get into Red Mountain, and she can't get into Lost World, and she can get into Final Egg. So all those other areas, basically, they don't have a loading zone. The ones that did have a loading zone, I already detailed why it doesn't quite work. So your options for, off the bat, your options for trying to load into, to try to activate the quick glitch using an unintended level is limited. And by the way, if you're curious what I'm doing here, I should just talk about this. I've started a second file as Sonic because there are a couple glitches which, specifically Knuckles is the only reason why, although in this run I'm also going to have to go a little bit further and unlock Amy to correct my mistake. But there's certain glitches you can do with Knuckles where you soft lock yourself on the first file. In order to get Knuckles into certain stages on one file, you have to soft lock him, and you need him not soft locked to be able to finish the rest of his campaign stages on another file. So Knuckles, you need to do 2 run-throughs on 2 different files, which is why I'm going to have to unlock him a second time using a second file. This was always intended. Anyway, what was I talking about? Right. So whereas originally, in order to get the quick glitch started, you can't get into places like Lost World, or you can't get into places like, or you can't finish stages like Emerald Coast. But that's not really super relevant, because on versions where you can activate the quick glitch using Casinopolis, which is accessible, so that's like the PS3 and the GameCube version, I do believe on PC it's still broken. I believe both drop table A and B for Casinopolis are broken on, or are unstable drop addresses on PC. So I don't think PC there's any future there. For GameCube, it's possible. On either of these versions, you only really need to get your foot in the door, because once you've got your foot in the door, you can then load up other stages through the quick glitch and then complete those once and then twice to see if you can get to see if they have any more amenable drop addresses. So for instance, like if you complete, if you've got the quick glitch active and you load in, like, I don't know, let's say you load in Sand Hill, right? And you load in Sand Hill to Amy or to Big, and then you complete Sand Hill, which you can do because all you need to do is get to the bottom of Sand Hill and there's a wind trigger. So boom, we've completed Sand Hill. Let's find out where Sand Hill drops us. So again, because it's garbage data, Sand Hill actually directs you to a float, which is a different byte. It's a different kind of data storage, which doesn't work like the rest of them, and it ends up crashing the game. But it's promising as far as it says, like, oh look, if you do complete other stages, you can go to like different wacky places, and maybe you could form a chain. Like maybe theoretically, in a dream world, in a world where I'm dreaming, you can complete complete Casinopolis once, and then that gives you quick glitch, and then you load in Sand Hill and complete that once, and then that gives you Lost World, and then you complete Lost World, and then that gives you, and then that gives you like Windy Valley or something. And then for Windy Valley, you have coordinates, so then you can use that for spawning displacement to be able to successfully complete other stages. Like, it'd be cool if we could keep expanding our palette, going back to an earlier metaphor. If we could keep expanding our kind of palette of options our approaches to be able to access and complete stages with these other characters. Sadly, it's not really the case. Almost all of the drop addresses for all these stages, even stages like I was talking about earlier, so for instance like Amy into Lost World, you can use the quit glitch to complete Lost World with Amy. And it's like, oh awesome, let's see what new options are available to us. Sadly, they're not really new options, they're in fact old options, because completing Lost World with an unintended character just drops you to 0-0 again. It has the same effect as Casinopolis. So that's unfortunate. I actually, this is a very rare interaction. You see the timer stopped there because I hit the win trigger, I hit the emerald, but then I went right off the edge and I died before it properly resolved. Anyway, so like what I was talking about was like when you complete, and it's coming back to me now. So when you complete the Lost World, it just puts you at, it puts you in level 0-0. Which again, no one has any unique coordinates for that, so that's not going to help you with spawn displacement to solve other stages. If you complete Skydeck twice, so Skydeck's drop B, or B table drop address for PS3 actually is Twinkle Park, which is awesome. It takes you to Twinkle Park Act 1, because, again, it almost seems intended. The two characters that go to Twinkle Park, which is Big and Amy, will have specific drop coordinates. So you would think that this would allow for displacement, and it does. But sadly, this displacement is not enough to successfully get these characters into levels that they otherwise would not have been able to complete. So that's kind of a dead end. And that's about as far as I've gone with plumbing the depths of the drop table A and B. And it really is mainly limited to PS3. I mean, I have a document that I've been working on since I was, how old was I? Since I was 18, maybe? I have a document I've been working on pretty consistently since I was 18, maybe earlier, maybe when I was 16, that details, I mean, I have tens of thousands, maybe like 100,000 words in this document of just recording information about this game, creating like, infographics and stuff, instructional guides for myself so I can remember how to do things when I've forgotten. And I have the drop tables in there. I have them mapped out. So here, because I'm willful and insistent, I'm avoiding getting the crystal ring or the light speed shoes, and I'm doing a little trick to avoid having to get height in this area, and then get over and hit the button without ever having the light speed shoes. I just did this for fun. I'm just having fun here. Certainly, I know this isn't going to be setting any records after I accidentally screwed up Amy's save file, which is going to cost me, alone is going to cost me about 20 minutes, maybe longer. Probably longer, actually, probably considerably longer. So, we're going to, again, attempt this fatal clip in Casinopolis, which just never works for me, and I'm very stubborn about trying it before eventually giving up. So that's probably like, if I'm talking like future developments of like where this challenge will go in the future, if I ever, return to work on it religiously, and I do sometimes fall back into this pattern of working on these things, it would be about exploring further drop tables. There's also the possibility, because at least at the time that I'm recording this, this is the 20th of April, Easter Day, 2025, and the Switch 2 was recently announced, the Nintendo Switch 2. Which features a Switch Classics thing. They're now selling old games for huge amounts of money on their Switch 2 store when it drops. And I am hopeful that Sonic Adventure or Sonic Adventure DX will feature in that digital store because Sega continues to cooperate with Nintendo. So I hope that I might see it on there. And if it does appear on there, that's a whole new port. That will be a port of a port of a port of a port of a port, probably. And that one will have all new jank to explore, which hopefully includes new drop tables. So we're working our way through Casinopolis for the second time. This segment, I do recall, this is Casinopolis Act 2, which is called Dilapidated Way. Very great vibes. Love being in a giant dumpster. And now we're kind of just winding down here. You're going to see some more of my poor gameplay. I'd like to thank everyone that made this run possible. There have been many generations, sometimes anonymous generations of people over the years discovering different glitches. If I do redo this run, it will involve one of the most annoying tricks, which is Sonic Red Mountain early. There is a way, it was discovered by Darkspine Sonic, there is a way to get directly from completing, or not even, from completing Emerald Coast. You can go from Emerald Coast, and then you can use a wall run, and you can do like a little bit of a couple wall runs and a couple clips to get Sonic over to, you'll notice here I don't have the Lightspeed shoes, which makes this even more painful. You can get directly from Emerald Coast over to Red Mountain. And then that allows for Red Mountain and Skydeck. I can complete Red Mountain and Skydeck, and that allows for Speed Highway and Red Mountain to become available through Trap 2 by sequence breaking Sonic. Because we actually have to do that in order to get Tails access to Red Mountain, because Red Mountain is again one of those two stages where there's an automatic fade out, which the game considers a completion. I don't know why I am... okay, it appears I'm actually trying to play this pinball game, which is crazy. I never do this. To get more rings. This is an enormous waste of time, and it might have benefited us all if I had actually finished a nice tight run of this without a lot of mistakes. But you get what you get. There are some similarities here with all these things that I'm doing to, for instance, the Chow Key glitch in Adventure 2. I know the Chow Key glitch allows for getting into unintended stages. It's kind of just always been like a kind of a desire, I think, a common desire among adventure fans, because we like the different playstyles afforded by the different characters. Typically, Big aside, usually people hate Big, which I respect. We like the different playstyles, and we kind of like the way that these games encourage you to use them in innovative ways, and you end up wanting to see these characters in action in other stages. Just kind of going to let this keep running for a while. Hopefully soon the torture will be over. Again, if you know the skip, okay, that loses me 50 rings. If you do know the skip on Casinopolis, it does save 5 minutes or something, and considering I do it at least twice in this run, it would save me 10 minutes off of the final runtime. I think you could probably whittle this run, max percent, 52 stages, you could probably whittle this down to 2.5 hours if you're pretty diligent. So that's like a whole hour of fat that you could kind of trim out. Here's my last recourse. I'm actually just going back to Dilapidated Way, which is a very sad state of things. Let's see, what else is there to talk about? The PC version, okay, so there's also worth remarking here, there are two different PC versions. There's the PC for 2004, and then there's the Steam version of the PC release. And technically speaking, if you really wanted to be granular, the Steam version is a port of the PC release for Windows. But that's only if you're really nitpicky. Let's talk about the stages that are impossible to complete anyway, and I know that they're impossible to complete because there are instances where, as I said before, assets don't load. So any character that's not intended for Hot Shelter will not have a default Sonic asset portfolio to fall back on, which means no capsule or loading zones. So Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles cannot complete Hot Shelter. So out of the theoretical maximum 11 stages of each character, so that's 66 possible, in a vacuum, 66 possible stages, those three cannot complete Hot Shelter, so that takes us down to 63. From there, we already talked about how Big has issues completing Speed Highway on the PS3 version because of a lack of spawning displacement at the At Dawn segment. So that's another instance of a stage we can't complete, so that takes us down to 62. Some other ones that come to mind, depending on your definition of Tails, completing Emerald Coast and Red Mountain, if you're calling those completions. And if you're also including the fact that Knuckles can complete Ice Cap, if you do the 256 glitch on this version, then that takes us up to 55, which means that somewhere between 55 and 62, there are 7 stages that can't be completed with the specific character combination. I think a lot of them probably come from Knuckles and Big, I want to say. If I'm looking, I mean, if I can just look over at my menu right now, if I look over at the list, I believe Tails finishes every stage. I think Amy might finish every stage. I know Big in Windy Valley is not possible. Big spawns into Windy Valley and just plummets to her death, so that's not doable. I could probably pull up some more guides. I don't really have any of my guides open. I kind of just let this one rip. I just opened it and started commentary. I apologize for the meandering style of my conversation, or my monologue. Probably this would be a lot better if I wrote everything out in advance. Maybe I'll make a nicer version of this with visual guides and a slightly less unhinged manner of storytelling. Here we're getting into Ice Cap again. There is a fun glitch connected to Ice Cap, which I'm not going to talk about at length, but Big can get into if Big comes up here and grabs his flotation belt and then turns around without completing Ice Cap, you can perform a clip to get him into the hotel early. So he's into the hotel before he finishes Ice Cap, and that actually loads a beta hotel from the Japanese version, which features like unique assets and stuff. Very fun to explore. And I'd love to see a version of this route which includes it, but this version does not. So now we're going to see me fail to execute what I nailed flawlessly the first time. I'm going to fail this jump like 7 times. Nope. So let's talk about those missing 7 stages again. So we had we're working from 55 to 62. We had 61. We brought our number down to 61 because we said Big can't finish Windy Valley. What else can't Big finish? Big can't do Speed Highway, but I don't know if I already factored that one in. Oh, Knuckles and Amy cannot complete Emerald Coast. So there's 59. So there's just 4 stages in there that aren't quite coming to mind. But I've thought about like I think this is the most entertaining version of this run. There are other variants. So there's obviously the variants I talked about on other platforms, on other versions of the game where maybe there are more stages available, but it involves a 256 glitch or other kind of tedious glitches. There's a version where it's just about accessing the stages, so this is more in line with my original philosophy about just getting every character into every stage. But it's kind of boring to watch characters just load into a stage and then pause and quit. That's kind of boring to watch for 3 hours. So it's nice to watch these characters actually use their tools to try to complete these stages. In conjunction with that, there's actually, I should say, there's perhaps a more interesting version of this, which is less in line with a speedrun, which would be max acts or acts percent or something, which is, you've seen it a couple of times. It's been easier for me to, for instance, with like Amy and Speed Highway, it was easier for me with Amy and Speed Highway to load into Act 3 and then just complete Act 3, with Act 3 being a very brief excursion. But I could theoretically load Amy into Act 1 in the same circumstance. I could just select Sonic's version of Skydeck and load Amy into Act 1, and then play through Skydeck and from Act 1 to Act 3 as Amy, which involves some more interesting interactions. But the thing is that, I mean, that's obviously not optimal for time, but if the condition were play through as many acts as possible, then I could play through Act 1 through 3, and that would involve some more gameplay. So I've considered max acts before, instead of max stages.
Oh no.
There's also the possibility of, like, if we're considering just a completion requirement, we expand it even to things that aren't necessarily stages. So there's the sub-act, what are called sub-acts or something, the side ones, so like Sand Hill sandboarding, the Sky Act 1 and 2, the ones where you're flying on a tornado. Amy can complete Sky Act 1, actually, counterintuitively, because all you really need to do with Sky Act 1 is just survive. It's just a survival thing. So Amy spawns into that map, like way under the map, out of nowhere. Like I've never even, using like cheats and like cheat engine, like free camera and stuff, I've never even been able to find her where she loads in. But you can load in with Amy, or with any, with E102 or Big or whoever you want, into Sky Act 1. And then you can just sit there, and then eventually the game will resolve Sky Act 1, and boom, you finish the stage. So that's not the most entertaining example. A more entertaining example would be Sandhill, which plays a lot more like an action stage. Just as instances where, if I expand the definition of a stage to include those things, or I create a run where those things are included, you could see more action, you could see more interactions of characters in stages where they don't belong. That's entertaining to watch. I get so antsy during this fight. It's such a shame I have to do it every single time. Whenever possible, I skip Chaos 4 because it's just so boring, man. With pretty much everything else in this game, there's a way to exploit it to be like faster. So you could like you can rush down Chaos 2 and Chaos 0 you can interrupt, and Chaos 0 doesn't take too long. Chaos 4 you're just sitting in a swamp for X amount of time. There's nothing you can do about it. There's an exploit which is interesting, which is that when Sonic has his lightspeed attack, I guess it's not an exploit, it's an intended feature. When Sonic has his lightspeed attack, or when Knuckles uses his maximum heat attack, which is kind of his version of the lightspeed attack, on Chaos 6, while Chaos 6 is frozen, it does double damage, which means that you can 2-cycle Chaos 6 instead of having to 4-cycle them. And sadly, that's not an option with Chaos 4. With Chaos 4, you must always do the 4-cycle, or honestly the 5-cycle, I don't even remember what it is. There's no way to skip it. So we've just unlocked Knuckles. And normally this is where things would end. This is normally where you'd be like, all right, Knuckles is unlocked, we're good. We can go over to Knuckles and finish this part. Unfortunately, because I screwed up by mistakenly I misremembered. I thought that completing Speed Highway leads to the drop badges 0-0, which perpetuates the quit glitch. That was a mistaken belief by me. That is not the case. So I ended up crashing that old save file. Now with this one, I now have to play through Sky Act 1 and wait and to unlock Amy, who I do think I pick up right after this, admittedly. So it's not catastrophic. I mean, it's not like having to unlock Big, which would take another several stages. But it just, kind of reinforces the idea that you do have to be very tentative. You have to be very careful with when you reset the game. I mean, we already saw earlier I was overzealous resetting after I finished Hot Shoulder with Big, and that ended up screwing me up because I had to refinish it. And then I made a mistake later, and I didn't reset when I should have, and that caused me to do this. So, general attentiveness will benefit any runner of max %. And no one would ever really do this besides me. I know a while ago Dragvalis did a version on PC. I think I actually accompanied. I actually did commentary on that. I think when we did that for it was like a speedrun event. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, I was there for that. But that was cool. But that wasn't the fullest implementation of it. I mean, that was only on PC instead of PS3. The thing is that a lot of people are hesitant to use the PS3 version. The PS3 version is kind of inaccessible. I mean, you obviously have to, if you don't have it physically, these things, they're not making any more of these things. They're not making any more PS3s with the software installed on them from the PlayStation Arcade, because I think that thing shut down a while ago, or the PlayStation Store. The alternative is to install RPCS3, the emulator, and then use that. But people are kind of hesitant to do that just because it's a bit of a headache to do for only one game, as opposed to like Dolphin, where you're getting a whole bunch of different games at once. So here we're just wrapping up Sky Act 1. Gonna pick up Amy, and then we'll be on our way to finishing the game. I don't know. I think I might choose to do Knuckles first, because that way I had to skip the Amy Hot Shelter split because I screwed up. But I think we do Knuckles first, and then we go grab, and then we wrap up Amy with Amy and Hot Shelter. I probably have to do Casinopolis over again. Kind of a headache. Yep. All right. So there's that split, and that would be like, you know, much longer than it should be.
Select your character.
It's my turn now.
There's also versions of this that you could do. You could do max percent on PC. You could do max percent for GameCube. And depending on how willing you are to set that bar, you know, with taking it up an additional stage, even if that means playing a stage 256 times in one sitting, which I've been hesitant to do, but probably should be done at some point just for the sake of having said that I've done it, or that someone's done it. Here's our last Cream appearance, I believe. Yeah, so I'm running over to Casinopolis to just real quick do this trick to get in. And then I'm going to load in Hot Shelter. And you'll actually see this, because I screwed up. You will see that... Where am I going? Oh no, am I really... Okay, for some reason, I've decided against the much faster trick, and I'm running back to go get the Burger Man. What is going on? Oh no, I've decided against playing through Casinopolis. I'm just going to play through with Twinkle Park. I've decided Twinkle Park is faster. Okay. There are versions that you could do for the different platforms. But yeah, this was kind of the culmination of really over a decade of obsessively playing and analyzing this game. And there's still some more distance to go, maybe. Depending on how dedicated I am to it. Oh, what I was going to say earlier is you will see after I complete Hot Shelter, I guess not anymore, but after you complete Hot Shelter, Amy will be trapped in the past, which is exactly how Knuckles gets soft-locked when he does his trapped variant 1 glitch by completing Casinopolis out of sequence. Because when he completes Casinopolis first, he also gets sent to the past. And the thing with the past is that it is such a dead end. It is not, there is no direct connection to any other adventure hub or any action stage. The only way out of the past is by following a cutscene, and this game is very diligent with its cutscenes. To this point, we've kind of been playing around them very delicately, but with cutscene flags, this game is very punishing. If you do not have the right flags completed, the game will not allow you to do certain things, including cutscenes. So if you load in to the past out of sequence through either completing Casinopolis, or theoretically Amy could complete the quick glitch and then load in Casinopolis, or load in Hot Shelter and then go to the past. In both instances, their cutscene triggers will not be there, and they will be soft locked in the past forever. So that's one reason, among others, why it's a complicating factor, certainly, for Amy to do the quick glitch on versions like, you know, it's kind of a catch-22, right? If we're looking at the GameCube version of Amy, because with GameCube Amy, you might think like, oh, I want to complete Hot Shelter out of sequence so that I can complete Casinopolis, so that I can load Casinopolis I can go to Casinopolis for the second time and get the drop B address and go to Emerald Coast, and then quit from Emerald Coast to wherever I want to go. And it's like that's you know, it's a fairly reasonable sequence of thought, but it's not possible unless you do the 256 glitch, because it's not possible to get to Hot Shelter. And even if it were, you would be trapped there. You would be sealed in if you got there out of sequence, so you have to do the 256 glitch. Because, mercifully, the 256 glitch, while it does clear the game's memory as to whether or not you have completed a stage, it does not undo cutscene flags. So you will still set the cutscene flags required, so you can't soft lock yourself by playing through the 256 glitch, which is a, you know, a small mercy. You go through all that effort and your game becomes unusable. Here we're gonna get the Warrior Feather. I guess I might as well make a remark here about there have been dreams for a while about doing a low percent version of Sonic Adventure DX, which is collecting as few of the upgrades as possible. And all of my shenanigans that I've kind of developed here and collected from various sources about warping, you know, I've done a lot of like wrong warping. Like the quick glitch will let you wrong warp, in a sense, because you can manipulate the drop table. So one would believe that this would allow you to skip the acquisition of resources, to skip the acquisition of upgrades. But very often, sadly, that's not the case. So for instance, like, I don't know if we consider the infamous example is we want to skip Sonic's Lightspeed shoes. And you can skip his Lightspeed shoes for a while, but eventually you get to the Red Mountain loading zone. And the Red Mountain loading zone will not spawn until you kill a monkey in a cage. And you can't kill the monkey in a cage through any means other than using the Lightspeed attack. And the Lightspeed attack's usage is predicated on you having the Lightspeed shoes. So all this is to say, here I'm having to check. Yeah, all right, there we go. Here's one instance where free camera is not as good as auto camera. All this is to say that because of this one specific condition and spawning in the Red Mountain loading zone, Sonic cannot dodge the Lightspeed shoes. He must acquire the Lightspeed shoes to use the Lightspeed attack. Which is a bummer. Because it would be fun to play through this game and find challenges of ways to avoid these, you know, these upgrades. I believe Amy just needs to get her Warrior Feather as a consequence of having to progress through this area. I don't know if it's actually linked to a story flag or not. I could revisit low percent and see if I could find some way to get around things, but for the most part, the game is really tight. Which is crazy to say given what you've been witnessing thus far. But for the most part, when it comes to actual skipping story progress, the game is not very forgiving. Here I'm kind of just making my way through Hot Shelter. Again, we needed to complete this for this to count as one of Amy's stages. You can't very well advertise this as a 52 stages max percent and then just say, oh well, and skip Amy's stage because you soft-locked your first file. You do have to go back and clean up your mess. I say all this in the second person, of course it's my mess. And then once this is resolved, we will see Knuckles play through his stage. We will do Trap Variant 1 with Knuckles, which again soft locks him because it seals him in the past and would make it impossible to get the other stages that we needed him to get earlier. A large part of this too about the routing and the format, the routing of this route is, as I mentioned earlier, one restriction is that Tails can't be played until after Big finishes Casinopolis, because in order for Big to finish Casinopolis, the Emerald needs to be there. And another thing is that like things are a little herky-jerky, and for instance, like E102 is split up into 2 segments. I would much rather, just for the uniformity of it, have a character done all at once, but E102 has to be done in 2 different segments because E102 pulls the stages that he plays from other characters, and those characters would not have finished their stages yet at the time. So I need to actually go finish those and unlock those stages with those characters to then make them available to play with E102. So the routing of this route itself was kind of a fun puzzle. I probably would have more of that in mind if I had recorded this much earlier, but as it were, you're just gonna have to suffer through my half-remembered ramblings. I'm currently struggling with a puzzle. This is the other kind of a sad thing, is that I tend to struggle with the very basic features of this game. I currently am looking for the last cube, which is over there. Or the second to last cube. The last one's up on the rafters. So what other routing concerns are there? It's mainly just like, I ended up creating a color-coded version of the document on the right, eventually, which helped me keep track of where I pulled the stages from. So for instance, like Lost World 2 and Tails would be highlighted in red because I would know that I pulled it specifically from Knuckles. Otherwise, I just need to kind of know that stuff off the top of my head. But that's Hot Shelter done. The timer did stop. So now we're into the final stretch. We're just going to see a fun little segment of Knuckles completing. He's getting a Trap Variant 1. And then we're going to see him complete some stages. And this has a very special kind of magic for me because Knuckles in Windy Valley was a very early discovery of the kind of magic of running the game like this.
Select your character.
Okay, let's go.
So we're setting up Knuckles' file.
As far back as I can remember,
We've been skipping all these beautiful cutscenes. That's one other thing to talk about. I say that a bit sarcastically. On Adventure, the cutscenes are all unskippable without mods. So you got worse camera, you got unskippable cutscenes. And between the two of those, it kind of taxes the patience enough that I haven't done much working on it. Even if I have the probably inhuman patience to play through Emerald Coast 256 times and Twinkle Park, whatever the double of that is, 512 times over the course of my gaming career. Probably more than that. I know I've done it at least twice. We're going to see some Burger Man action. I'm going to use the Burger Man statue to clip into the train station. Burger Man used to feature a lot more and everything, but over time he's been gradually phased out as I discover other ways to interact with the polygons to kind of get through there. So I've clipped under the train station. I'm going to jump up through here. I'm going to fly through this wall. This is finicky. Hopefully I get it early. There's kind of two places you can fly through this wall. You can either use the collision of this television, which I've found to be somewhat forgiving, and then there's also kind of a segment where you can just fly right through the geometry of the wall on the left. But I've kind of forgotten how to do that. Come on, you can do it. Fly through that wall. Some other things worth talking about, I mean, maybe possible undeveloped... There are always other tricks kind of bubbling under the surface. We talked earlier about, like, big into the hotel early, big into the beta hotel. That's not really been used in a run yet, but I had thought for a while that it might be important, but it ended up not being important. We've also got Sonic Red Mountain early, which ends up being important in this context of this challenge. Another great thing about this challenge is the way that it pulls in all these different glitches. You're kind of, you're using trap glitch, entrance glitch, quick glitch. You're not using 256 glitch mercifully on the PS3 version, but that's only because of the standards that I set. You could easily do that also. Kind of, we're using the full buffet, the full palette. Another thing that might get used is on the PC 2004 version, depending on the way things shake out, on the PC 2004 version, you can load into a character's demo, into the demo screen. So the demo screen at the beginning of the stage, at the beginning of the game, if you wait on the start menu long enough, which we didn't do, it will eventually show cutscenes from the game and gameplay from the game. And what you can do is, if you make a specific input, I think it's pressing the start button at a certain time, you can load into that demo. So there are playable demos, and then you can do certain things, like if you walk, I mean, depending on the story progress, I know if you load into like the Sonic demo in Twinkle, or in the Mystic Ruins, you can go from the Mystic Ruins to the Chow Garden, and the Chow Garden, for whatever reason, triggers the Knuckles cutscene, the Knuckles fight cutscene in the Chow Garden, and Sonic and Knuckles are like drifting around the Chow Garden talking. Very strange. That's on the PC version. That might come up. I mean, there's a possibility that playable demos might come up in the future for more exploits. I was talking a bit about this earlier, but there's sort of a difference between... There's a bit of a hurdle, which is whether or not the asset portfolio actually loads. So, for instance, for Big and Windy Valley, the asset portfolio loads, but he spawns outside of the course and drops like a stone, so there's no hope of getting him into the course. And even if you could, the probability that he's able to successfully navigate that gap that we saw Amy get over using the springs is so low. That's probably not going to happen. Here's Knuckles and Final Egg. So there's kind of a distinction between, are the assets there versus are the assets not there, because it's very hard to imagine a way to exploit the game to get the assets to load. Another kind of hidden glitch lurking in the game is the possibility of altering your character number. So characters each have their own number, which is that pass that I was talking about earlier. So Sonic has a Sonic Pass, Knuckles has a Knuckle Pass. There's possibly a way that you can change it so that you can access the cutscene exclusive characters of Tikal and Eggman, because Tikal and Eggman are rendered in the same engine as the rest of these characters. So in a very distant future, there's a possibility that we are using Tikal and Eggman also, and that Tikal and Eggman get to finish their own stages as well, which would be very funny to see. Because the spawning location is standard across all the characters, not intended for a given stage. So for your final egg, I know for a fact that if you just drop at the right angle, you will just land into the final zone, the final room of Final Egg Act 3, and then you'll just be there and, like, you know, bing bang boom. But it's an old habit of mine that with Tails and with Knuckles I always end up spinning around in space until I eventually find the course, and then I kind of navigate my way through it. We saw earlier how that worked with Amy, how I ended up hopping over the bars. And here we do it with Knuckles. It's not optimal, but it is fun. Further evidence for the possibility of an all acts playthrough. Now we're going to go into settings, and we have to do this because, oh, this is fun, it's actually finally relevant. You can, in fact, pull next level data from other save files. So here I've gone back into the first save file, where Tails has been completed largely normally, and then I can jump back over to Knuckles, and Knuckles is going to activate Trap Variant 2 from the source Tails, and if you'll recall, it's going to pull the first stage. It's going to the N-1 stage, where N is the first stage after the first completed, which in this case is the second stage. So he'll go to Tails' first stage, which is Windy Valley. And here we are with Knuckles in Windy Valley. And this is just a nice, fun, easy romp through Windy Valley. And this is very nostalgic for me. And it's all pretty straightforward. So you can pull data between save files. That ends up not being super relevant here, but it is relevant in, for instance, in my testing. So when I'm playing this game casually as I can, I suppose. When I am playing this game myself, I will keep a file that's 100%ed, and then that way I kind of have an index of all possible, levels unlocked. And then when I create a new file and I create a glitched character profile, so if I create, a Trap 2 Knuckles, or I create a Quick Glitch Big, I can go back to that fully completed file, and then I can just pull whatever stage that I want out of there. And that's it. That's time. I've gotten the last emerald. And you'll notice again it was an emerald rather than a capsule because we haven't completed Tails' second stage on this file. And that about does it for our video here today. Thank you all for joining me. And it's been a real joy to put this together. And it only really occurred to me to provide this commentary video, this long after the original video got made. Just because it just occurred to me to upload it. So I just kind of went in and just did some commentary. Hopefully it was not totally impenetrable. That you guys understood what I was talking about. So anyway, that's all I got for you today. Maybe there will be new videos. Maybe there won't be. But have a nice life.